Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. And tonight we have the live reaction to the 2023 NBA draft. And definitely for sure, Spurs fans cannot wait for the selection of what they are presumably knowing it will be Victor Wembanyama, the 7'5" phenom out of France. He has skills all over the place shooting the three ball. He can drive. He can handle the basketball. So it's almost like he's an even bigger Chet Holmgren. People thought things that Chet Holmgren could do that no one taller than him could. But Victor Wembanyama is proving people wrong. And if he can stay healthy in the NBA, he could be a generational talent for the San Antonio Spurs. But that's not all. We have tons of other selections as well. Who's going to be taken second in the draft? Is it going to be Brandon Miller? Is it going to be Scoot Henderson? Or is it going to be somebody else? Live poll here where you can choose between Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson if you guys would like to vote. You've got that poll right there. It'd be really interesting to see which player you guys think will be taken second overall. It's going to be really interesting for sure. But definitely we know who should be picked number one, but it's going to come down to who we think is going to be picked second and beyond. It's going to get really interesting after that. And there's probably going to be a lot of really solid players in this draft that could have a shot of having a really solid NBA career, even besides Victor Wembanyama. Jackson Johnson says, "What's up, Only Talk Sports Nation?" Really appreciate you for being here, Jackson. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. As well, RC Talks NBA and WNBA. Man, Only Talks, bro, I'm glad to see you in the building for sure. It's glad to be back on a live stream. It's been a while after, the NBA finals ended. That was a great finals, but definitely it's going to be really interesting tonight. The highly anticipated draft, as it always is every single year, but probably even more so this year. Not because we don't know who's going to be picked number one, but it's because who is getting picked number one. And Victor Wembanyama. It's going to be a big deal for sure. Adam Silver, he's up there. He's about to announce the first pick in the draft. We know more than likely 99.99% who it's going to be, but still intriguing nonetheless. But definitely looking forward to seeing who gets picked after him as well. It's going to be really interesting for sure. RC says, make no mistake, it will be Brandon Miller at number 2. And that's what the poll thinks right now as well. You've got 67% people think that Brandon Miller will be it, and then 33% on Scoot Henderson. Nobody's picked the someone else. So definitely Brandon Miller, he kind of would fit more positionally, overall with the roster of the Charlotte Hornets because of the fact that they already have LaMelo Ball. Scoot Henderson really wouldn't make as much sense next to LaMelo Ball. I think they could play together, but it probably would make more sense to have Brandon Miller a small forward or a power forward, depending on what you want to put him in the rotation. I think that is what the Charlotte Hornets need just a little bit more. So that makes sense, RC, for sure, to have Brandon Miller being picked number 2. But I really do appreciate both you guys for being here so much. It's going to be really interesting. They're about to announce. Definitely got to build up that anticipation. Got to build up the drama. Not only besides the draft, it's going to be insane. There have been some crazy trades made recently. You had the Bradley Beal trade with Chris Paul. That was insane. Then you had, the Marcus Smart. He got traded away from the Boston Celtics for Kristaps Porzingis, and now Marcus Smart's with the Grizzlies. There is so much stuff going on right now in the NBA. It's like it's taking over the entire news story right now in sports for sure. They're showing Jay Billis' best available players. You got the Thompson brothers, Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller, Anthony Black. I mean, so many great players after Victor Wembanyama. You got Kassan Wallace, Jarris Walker, all in the top 10 of Jay Billis' best available. The Spurs, they were 22-60 last year, had the second worst record in the NBA, but definitely hoping for them that they can take a player that will change their fortunes, change their luck, and help them be able to build and possibly be a better team this next season. But it's going to be real interesting. You got Cam Whitmore as well out of Villanova, and Jay Billis' top 10 available. RC says Scoot Henderson giving me more built Ja Morant vibes. That is an interesting point, RC. Scoot Henderson's really athletic. Some people knock his perimeter jumper. They say that he's not, is polished on the outside. He's much more of an attacker, but you can develop that jump shot in the NBA as long as you have an off-the-dribble game, because of the fact you can get by your defender almost at will despite not having an elite three-point shooting ability. So I think that Scoot Henderson will be okay. I definitely think for sure that looking overall, at Scoot Henderson's, tape and how he plays, he'll be fine without a three-point shot. It's not something that he needs to work on. However, now looking at some other players at the top of his draft, a lot of players are not really good at shooting the basketball. You look at, players like Anthony Black, really talented point guard at 6'6", but he also isn't the best three-point shooter either. So definitely he's going to have to work on that. A lot of players are going to have to work on their jump shooting ability toward the top of the draft. That's why some people think that Grady Dick might get drafted a little bit higher, the guard/forward out of Kansas, because he is a great three-point shooter. So he'll be able to potentially use that and be able to get drafted higher because some of these other guys struggle. Victor Wembanyama, though, 7'5", and he can shoot the three ball. For him, it's going to completely be about health. The Spurs are going to have to hope that he stays healthy. But looking at his tape, they're showing it right now, right before we know he's going to get picked number 1. He's dunking everywhere. He's shooting threes. All he's got to do is stay healthy. And if he does, he will be a massive asset and a fun player to watch for years to come in the NBA. For the Spurs, could be their next generational talent after they picked Tim Duncan back in 97 in number 1. Jeff says, I'm here and ready to go. Really appreciate you for stopping by, Jeff. Again, looking so forward to this for sure. We got 6 votes in the poll for who will get drafted second. 50% have Brandon Miller. 17% of you guys have Scoot Henderson. 33% someone else. Definitely Brandon Miller is the favorite by you guys to be picked second overall. And I think that is definitely viable for sure because of the fact that you look at Brandon Miller, he positionally fits what the Hornets need, whereas Scoot Henderson doesn't really fit that as much. Now, they could take someone like a Taylor Hendricks, they could take someone like a Cam Whitmore, but you do feel like it will be Brandon Miller. You guys definitely seem to agree. Traveling Fools, thanks for stopping by. Really appreciate that. We got the NBA draft here tonight. It's going to be so much fun to see all of these guys' futures. All these fantastic players from college basketball living out their dream of getting to be in the NBA. It's always so cool to see every single year these guys' dreams get fulfilled. It's a big deal for these guys because they work so hard their whole entire lives, and only a few, less than 2%, as Jerry Rice would say in his commercial that he always talks about, less than 2% go pro. So if you are lucky enough to go pro, it is definitely a big deal for sure. For these guys, it is so awesome. V Ohio State says, what's up, Only Talk Sports? Really appreciate you for being here, V Ohio State, as well as Traveling Fools, Jeff, RC, and Jackson. Really appreciate you for being here. And you say as well, I'll be on and off in the chat cooking dinner now while watching the draft. Appreciate that for sure. Hopefully you're cooking a really good dinner. You got to eat something really tasty while you're watching the draft for sure. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, especially once Victor Wembanyama gets picked. Once he gets picked, then we're going to find out after that who could possibly be taken second, taken third, and then so on and so forth. And it's all going to be about team needs. People talk about that all the time. It's not just about who's the best player on the board. Sometimes it's team needs. So that you can see a guy out of left field, someone that you're not even expecting at all to get picked, at a spot that maybe he's higher or lower than where he was expected to be, but it's all about fit as well. A lot of times these teams go off of fit. So that's definitely something we're going to have to keep an eye on when you're seeing a guy kind of slip through the cracks a bit that you thought would be a higher pick. A lot of it has to do with what these teams need. And I mean, really, with these NBA teams, they don't really need too much. You look at most of these teams have great players, but definitely the teams like the Spurs and the Hornets and the Rockets, they need players more than others, Trailblazers as well, if they keep the pick. That's been another topic of discussion as well. Will they keep the pick? I think the Trailblazers could keep the pick and be able to draft a player, but definitely Damian Lillard, he is getting older. They need players now, and maybe they could trade it and get somebody in return. Who knows? But I do think that they might keep the pick and maybe take Scoot Henderson if Brandon Miller's taken second. It's going to be very interesting. I'm looking so forward to these picks. They're still waiting on the number 1 pick. We know who it's going to be. We know it's going to be, but they have not announced it yet. And the Spurs also have 2 more picks as well in the second round, but definitely they are concerned about that number 1 pick. And I think it is about to happen. Adam Silver, he's going up there on stage to announce the pick. What will the San Antonio Spurs select? It's going to be interesting. We know who it is, but still the drama anyway is going to be unfolding, and they do select Victor Wembanyama. Not too much of a shock at all. Not really a shock in any way, shape, or form. The 7'5" center out of France that can shoot, drive, and do all sorts of things on the floor. He got picked number 1 to the San Antonio Spurs. What a draft selection. He is going to be a really interesting player to keep an eye on. Will he have massive success in the NBA? Who knows? All he has to do, in my opinion, is just stay healthy and continue to play his game and improve it. Maybe some of the weaknesses that he has, but there are not that many. Because, again, for a guy his size, being able to handle the ball, drive inside, shoot the 3 ball at a respectable rate is insane. Most guys that are as tall as him cannot shoot threes. And he shot around, I think, in his circuit in France around 32% for threes. So it's not like he shoots an elite percentage, but nobody his height has ever shot that well from the three-point line before. And the fact that he can take the ball off the dribble as well, almost like a point forward, even though he's a 7'5" center, is just unbelievable. So the Spurs, they've got their potentially generational talent, and we'll have to see as he embraces with Adam Silver how well his career, gets taken off the ground with San Antonio, how much he can impact the Spurs and helping them, potentially have a lot more success in the near future. He was the MVP of his league in France. I mean, that is a big deal. That is crazy. He's going off the stage now. I mean, that is massive for the Spurs. I mean, he's a literal massive human being, but he's definitely got a lot of skill set. He's not your traditional 7-foot-plus player. He is definitely an interesting player to watch for sure. So unique in a variety of ways. Ties the 6th tallest player. He's the ties for the 6th tallest player in NBA history. I mean, up there with Taco Fall and Yao Ming, the guys like that really did not have any type of perimeter skills at all. They were just lob threats, get the ball down low to them, and they were going to dunk it home. That was about all that they could do. But Victor Wembanyama, again, he is a unique basketball player in a variety of ways for sure. We've got another vote in the poll from you guys who will get drafted second. 43% Brandon Miller, 29% Scoot Henderson, 29% someone else. So one of you guys has picked Scoot Henderson to be taken second overall. Still Brandon Miller in the lead in the poll. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks for voting as well. It's really interesting to see what you guys think. We've got 8 votes now. Another person has picked Brandon Miller, 50% up there now on his percentage. 4 out of 8 of you guys think it will be Brandon Miller. And I have to agree. If I had to really think about it, had to bet on it, I would say that it would be Brandon Miller, because that's really what the Charlotte Hornets need. They need a forward, and they need shooting. And that's something that Brandon Miller can do. You talk about Victor Wembanyama's ability to shoot from the outside at the height that he's able to do. Brandon Miller might not be that crazy, but he's definitely comparable to a Kevin Durant. He's not Kevin Durant, but he can play like him and be able to drive and shoot the 3 and jump shots at the height of 6'9". And Brandon Miller would be able to help a Charlotte Hornets team that struggles to shoot the 3, and they don't really have anybody of his height at all that really can do that. So it's interesting for sure, but I definitely think that Brandon Miller would be the right pick for the Charlotte Hornets. But we'll have to see. We're not going to know until the clock is up and the pick is in. But they're still talking about Victor Wembanyama for sure. He is in tears, and that right there is what it's all about. Tears of joy. You getting drafted first overall. And really, if you get drafted at all, it's a big deal. But you're drafted first overall. I mean, just a few years ago, nobody knew who Victor Wembanyama was. I mean, no one really knows who these guys are when they're younger anyway. But for Victor Wembanyama, it's an even bigger deal. I mean, guys over in France, no one really knows who he is until a couple of years ago, and he comes out of nowhere. And he's just, you start seeing his tape online and how good of a player he is and just how unique of a player that he is. And it is crazy for sure. But it's definitely awesome to see him get picked number 1. His tears of joy. It's just so awesome to see. It's going to be crazy how much he can impact the Spurs right off the bat. Just right out of the gate, how well he'll be able to help them. It will be interesting to see. But the second pick in the draft will be coming up. Will be Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson, or someone else. We've got the poll. 8 votes are in, and 50% of them are for Brandon Miller. It's going to be really interesting to see who the Charlotte Hornets pick. The Hornets feels like they've been perpetually in a rebuild for a long time. They have not been a playoff team in several years. And you've even got the news. So much NBA news is going on. You even have the news of Michael Jordan potentially selling a stake, or I think he might have already sold a stake or whatever, to the Charlotte Hornets. It's crazy there. So, you look at the fact that the Hornets being in a perpetual rebuild, that's just not where you want to be. It's not the fact you want to be the worst team in the NBA. But at least when you're the worst team in the NBA, you have an excuse to really be bad. The Hornets have had some decent players the last few years. They just can't get it all together. So it's going to be really interesting to see with Charlotte if they can ever get out of this kind of mediocreness, right, where you're not great or you're able to make at least the play-in tournament, or you're so bad that you're getting like the top pick. They've got the second pick in the draft. They really struggled last year, but I still don't feel like they're going to complete rebuild either. So this pick's going to be very important for the Charlotte Hornets. Do they pick Brandon Miller, a guy that probably will be the best pick for them positionally, or do they go with maybe the higher upside player, Scoot Henderson, a guy that once he maybe gets his shot going and his athleticism to be able to get downhill, that would be insane for sure. We'll have to see. I think Brandon Miller has a lot of upside also, but you just feel like Scoot Henderson maybe has a little bit more upside at the end of the day. But definitely, whoever the Hornets pick, it will help their team. They need any talented player that they can get. You've got the second pick in the draft. I don't really think you can go wrong with either player, but probably Brandon Miller would make more sense positionally. But Victor Wembanyama, yet again, he was picked number 1. First in the draft to the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs got their generational player, and we'll have to see again how soon right out of the gate that he will be able to help out the Spurs franchise. It's going to be a big deal for them because they have been not so hot for the last few years. Adam Silver, he's up on stage again with the second pick in the draft. In the Charlotte Hornets, they do select Brandon Miller. So Brandon Miller is taken. They went with the positional pick. They went with that. That's a smart decision, I think, by the Hornets. They need a forward that can shoot the 3 ball, and that is what they went with. So they went with Brandon Miller. So you guys were right. At the end of our poll here, 50% pick Brandon Miller, 25% Scoot Henderson, and 25% to someone else. But you guys have picked Brandon Miller. You guys were correct. Thank you guys for participating in the poll. Now, obviously, the poll is over because of the fact that the pick is done. And Jeff, right on cue, says, told you. He went with Brandon Miller. So you were one of the ones that went with Brandon Miller for sure. So definitely you guys got that right. I mean, it's not surprising. I think that if they didn't have LaMelo, then Scoot Henderson probably would have made sense, to pick him. But since they're showing Brandon Miller's highlights right now in transition, he has the ability, to go up strong in the lane, finish through contact. He's also a decent passer as well. It's not like he's incapable of passing the basketball. He's pretty solid at that as well. And then he's got the 3-point shooting ability. So Brandon Miller, he's good in almost every facet of the game. There's not too many weaknesses that he has. So I think that overall, it's a pretty good pick by, the Charlotte Hornets. I think they made a good decision right there to draft the player that they needed over the player that potentially had the higher upside. I think that was a very smart decision. Now we got the third pick in the draft. It's going to be really interesting now. Is it going to be Scoot Henderson? Scoot Henderson, you would think, will be the next player taken. It probably will be him because he's probably the most talented player left on the board. That's hard to say because there's still so many talented players left. But I do think that Scoot Henderson probably should be taken third, especially if the Trailblazers do take the pick. They're showing Charlotte Hornets number 2 picks in NBA draft franchise history: Brandon Miller, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Emeka Okafor, and Alonzo Mourning. All those players have been really solid throughout history, but Brandon Miller potentially has a shot to be one of the best out of that group if he can really show his ability in the NBA. show his, elite perimeter game like they're showing right there. Dynamic in transition, half-court playmaker. Those are all key things. That is why Brandon Miller got taken second overall. Those are the type skills that these draft experts want to see, and these teams that are drafting players out of college want to see, because of the fact you've got to be able do those things if you want to have success. You have to be able to pass the ball. You can't be someone that gets the ball in your hands and you can't pass it anywhere. And more and more, they're wanting guys to be able to shoot. If you can't shoot threes these days in the NBA, it makes it very tough to get picked. It's not impossible. There will be some players that will get picked, if they're not, able to shoot the ball at a high rate. There's going to be some guys that don't really show that perimeter game, and they're going to get picked. But definitely they're not going to be getting picked second overall. That's why Brandon Miller got picked. It was for his height, his positional size, and the fact that he could shoot threes. So it's a big deal right there for sure. Definitely someone that cannot shoot the three ball at a high level, but he could be selected in the first round. Definitely right here. I've got another poll for you guys. We've got, will Trayce Jackson-Davis be selected in the first round? I know we're not there yet. It's a little bit farther away than where we're at right now, but that is a really interesting question, because Trayce Jackson-Davis had a fantastic 4-year career at Indiana, but he does not shoot the three ball. He did not ever display it in Indiana. He never hit a three, but he did show off maybe some perimeter game at the combine. Will he get picked in the first round? What do you guys think? 3 votes, 67%, 75% say yes, 25% say no. Again, thank you guys so much for participating in the poll. I really do appreciate it. It makes it a lot of fun for sure to engage with you guys. You guys are the best. And definitely that is going to be interesting. I think Trayce Jackson-Davis should be a first-round pick. And if he wasn't a senior, and if he wasn't a guy that did not display a perimeter game, in college, never showed it. If he did show a perimeter game and he wasn't, was 23 years old, which is something that the NBA, the age factor that they really care about. They like younger guys that have longer being able to develop in the pros. He would easily be a first-round pick, or even if this was 15 years ago. But again, really do appreciate you guys for participating in the poll so far. Definitely might have another poll or two before it's done if Trayce Jackson-Davis' question gets answered. Buckeye Mike, thanks for stopping by. Says, howdy, everyone. How are we doing as of late? Doing really good. Really appreciate you for stopping by. But we've got the draft tonight. So many players' futures are going to be answered. They're going to know where they're going to be playing, and they're going to have to do everything they possibly can when they get selected to stick in the league. Because it's not just the case where you get drafted and that's it, and you're in the league now, and you've got your rookie contract and everything's good to go. No, you've got to. The easy part's almost over, even though it's still the hard part. But the harder part is sticking in the league. You've got to be able to fit with the roster that you're on, and you've got to give it 110%, because if not, then you unfortunately could find your way not being in, the NBA any longer a few, years later, just 3 or 4 years later. So it's very unfortunate. It's not just about getting in the league. You got to be able to play hard, play as well as you possibly can, and be able to stick in the league. But the Portland Trail Blazers, they did not trade the pick in Adam Silver. He says it's Scoot Henderson. Scoot Henderson out of the G League Ignite and Overtime Elite. The two, programs that they have for players that skip college. They get to play in the, like the G League Ignite or Overtime Elite before they go to the NBA. More and more players are bypassing college and doing that. And a lot of players have had success from the players that have played in those type league. So it's really interesting there. But overall, looking at the fact that the Portland Trailblazers did not trade the pick. There was talks that they would, but they kept the pick and they took Scoot Henderson. He will be pairing up with Damian Lillard. Very interesting there. Buckeye Mike says, who went number 2? It was Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller out of Alabama got taken second overall to the Charlotte Hornets. For sure. Jeff says, yes, he will, or at least he should be. Definitely. So Scoot Henderson got taken third to the Trailblazers. It's crazy they kept the pick. There was a lot of speculation around that pick that they would not keep it. And you can't really blame them, people for thinking that, because of the fact that, they are a team with an older star in Damian Lillard. And Damian Lillard, his prime is not going to be lasting too much longer. And you want to be able to have players that are really great now to be around him. Something that the Trailblazers, they've had a few decent players around him, most notably CJ McCollum, but they don't have them on the team anymore. And the Trailblazers need to find a way to be able to build around Damian Lillard before it's too late. And Scoot Henderson, I mean, he's not the kind of guy that you're talking about that's already potentially ready to help Damian Lillard get back into the playoffs and have a chance to compete for a title. But Scoot Henderson is a guy that has a lot of upside. Just give him a year or two, and he could be that type of player, that dynamic player. And I think it can work with having him next to Dame, because even though Damian Lillard, he can score inside, he is way more of a three-point shooter, whereas Scoot Henderson can drive. I mean, he is a fantastic player off the dribble. He can dunk, and his three-point shot is developing. It's going to take more time, I think, for that to be the case. But overall, looking at Scoot Henderson, he shows you so much athleticism getting to the rim that I think that him getting picked number 3 is deserved for sure. I mean, it's not that any of the other guys below Scoot Henderson weren't, potentially, worthy of being picked 3rd overall, but Scoot Henderson is that good of a player, and I do feel like that the Trailblazers made the right decision to get Scoot Henderson. It's not Scoot Henderson's fault that overall, looking at, the Trailblazers, that the situation that they're in where they have an aging star and they're trying to build around before it's too late. That's all. That's the Trailblazers for, not building around Damian Lillard earlier. They still have a shot to do it, but if Scoot Henderson's not able to develop at the rate that they want him to be able to have him play at a high level next to Damian Lillard, I don't think that's Scoot Henderson's fault necessarily. It's going to be more of an instance where with Scoot Henderson, if he doesn't develop like in a year or two, and it takes him 3 or 4 years and he becomes good, because I think he is going to become a really great player. It's just going to take maybe a couple years or so to really get him at that highest of levels. That's just not going to be, anything that the Trailblazers can do. They're going to have to find a way to have some other good players to be able to build around Damian Lillard in the next couple of years. If they keep Damian Lillard, for him to have a shot to maybe be able to win, some substantial games in the NBA. I mean, it would really stink for, Damian Lillard to be able to be with the Trailblazers and just kind of bow out after 5 or 6 more years and retire, and he never really gets a chance to have, the opportunity to win a title or even get close to it. Damian Lillard is a great player. I know most people agree with that for sure, but I think there are a lot of people that kind of undervalue Damian Lillard in the NBA because of the fact that he's a guy that when you're looking at him on paper, you see the stats, but you're like, oh, he's only putting up those numbers because of the fact that he's on a bad team. And I think that is a fair thing to say. If Damian Lillard's on a team with other stars, would he score as much? Probably not. I don't think anybody would. But look at Devin Booker. He was putting up a massive amount of points with the Suns, and then they got Chris Paul. Then they got, Kevin Durant obviously just now, but they had, other players, DeAndre Ayton as well. And then the Suns, it took some of the scoring away from Devin Booker. He wasn't scoring as much. That doesn't mean Devin Booker wasn't as good as he was before. It's just he didn't have to score as much. So it's crazy for sure. I think that overall, though, the Trailblazers need to find a way to build around Dame, or unfortunately his time's just not going to be really utilized in the best of ways. So we'll have to see there. Now, I've got the Houston Rockets. They have the 4th pick in the draft. Some people thought that the Rockets could trade this pick as well. We'll have to see if they do. There's no indication of that yet. But the Rockets, they're a team that people are talking about some trade talks as well. Will James Harden go back to the Rockets? If that happens, that would be insane. And it would show you that the Rockets are trying to build something. I don't necessarily think having James Harden back on the Rockets was going to really help with the rest of the roster being so young. I think that if some of these guys were like 3 or 4 years older that the Rockets have, and then you had James Harden right now, it probably would be pretty solid. But I don't think, getting James Harden is going to be able to help the Rockets really compete either, at the top of the NBA with the other guys that they have being 20 and 19 years old. I mean, Jabari Smith, it's going to take him a while to really develop and start playing at a really high level. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Rockets. Are they going to take a Thompson brother? There's talks of that, Ammon or Ozzer Thompson. They could take one of those guys. They could take Taylor Hendricks. They could take, Cam Whitmore. There's a lot of options for the Rockets. They could also trade the pick, but we'll have to see. Jackson says, I wonder how Scoot Henderson got the name Scoot. It's a funny name. Yeah, I mean, definitely Scoot Henderson. It's cool because he can scoot for sure. He is a fast player. It suits his athletic ability, to a T. So I think it's awesome for sure, to have the name Scoot Henderson because, I mean, again, he is definitely a star in the making. We'll have to see how well he does develop next to Damian Lillard out there in Portland. But, again, he's got a lot of athletic ability. So definitely the top 3 picks were not too shocking. This could be the first pick where we're kind of shocked. The first 3, it kind of went in the order we thought. Victor Wembanyama, most people felt it was going to be Brandon Miller, and then Scoot Henderson. So not too surprising. The first 3 picks have been very predictable. But now Adam Silver is coming up for the 4th pick in the draft. The Houston Rockets, who are they going to pick? As long as they do not trade the pick, who are they going to pick? And the Houston Rockets do select a Thompson brother. They go with Ammon Thompson, the guard out of Overtime Elite. They went with Ammon Thompson. That guy is a really talented player. He can drive as well. He can pass. The one thing that the Thompson brothers do struggle with a little bit is shooting. They both struggle to shoot the basketball. A lot of players actually toward the top of this year's draft do struggle to shoot the 3 ball, which is very ironic because most of the time when you do have guys like this at the top, of the draft, they shoot the 3, at a high rate or at a high level. Like their accuracy rate is really high. And that's usually the case, but not this year. I think it's because so many of these guys are so talented. That's why they're getting picked as high as they are. Like Ammon Thompson, I mean, they're going to show his tape in a minute when he was at Overtime Elite. But, I mean, he can pass. He can drive. He's got a massive body for a guard. He's one of the tallest guards in this year's draft, along with his brother. So I think that him being picked 4th overall, the Rockets, not a bad pick at all. I mean, the Rockets, they could have taken a forward like Cam Whitmore or something like that, but they decided to go with a Thompson brother. It'll be interesting to see where his brother gets picked. But I don't think a bad pick at all. Not too surprising. Maybe the first one where maybe they could have went with someone else, but not a bad pick whatsoever. It's getting really interesting for sure. Jeff says to Jackson, laughing a lot, that is an interesting one on Scoot, for sure. Really appreciate all you guys for being here. We've got another vote in the poll. Will Trayce Jackson-Davis be selected in the first round? 80% of you guys say yes. 20% say no. That's really interesting. I know that most of the draft scouts actually had him in the second round, but I do feel like Trayce Jackson-Davis should be a first-round pick. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. They're showing Ammon Thompson right now. His tape, again, he's got athletic ability. 6'6", 6'7", depending on what you read. 215 pounds, and it's all about the pure athleticism. Getting to the rim, dunking at home. He's almost like in the driving ability like Scoot Henderson. Obviously can't drive like Scoot Henderson because he's way taller, but he is a fantastic driver to the basket, and that makes it so tough to stop him because he's so tall. Because when you're that tall, you can't get blocked as easy. So if you're Ammon Thompson and you're technically playing point guard or shooting guard or whatever, and you're being guarded by a regular type point guard like a 6'3" guy, that's what makes Ammon Thompson so dangerous. And even in the NBA, even though there are guys like Cade Cunningham and Ben Simmons, if he plays this year, guys like that can, shoot, or be able to drive over guys, and they can't handle the ball and shoot. Not Ben Simmons, but some of these other guys like Cade Cunningham, they can shoot threes at their height. It's interesting because of the fact there's not still that many of them. There's a lot of point guards like Damian Lillard, like Chris Paul. And if Ammon Thompson's on those guys, if he is playing point guard, how is he going to be able to defend them? That's going to be interesting. But on the offensive end, he should have his way because of the fact that he can drive over, he can shoot over the top of them. He can drive around them. I think that Ammon Thompson will have a lot of success potentially in the NBA. All these guys have the potential. There's usually every single year a draft bust or two, somebody that just doesn't really pan out the way that you feel like he will. But I do feel like the guys taken so far will all have success. All that Amen Thompson has to do is improve as a shooter. And if he does that, then I think that there definitely is a spot for him in the league, along with his brother. And he could be a major asset for the Rockets. Now, it's going to be interesting to see with the Rockets. Do they get James Harden in this offseason? We'll have to see. We're not going to really know about that yet until these trades happen. But if they do get James Harden, how will they fit together? I mean, James Harden is technically a shooting guard, but he can handle the ball. So how would they mesh together if that occurs? It's going to be interesting. The 5th pick in the draft, though, you got the Detroit Pistons, who had the worst record in the NBA this past season. So, again, shows you the luck of the draw when it comes to the NBA and getting the top picks, because they do, the lottery system where you can't tank anymore. They don't reward you for tanking. So even though Detroit had the worst record, Detroit has the 5th pick. They didn't get the 1st pick, so they did not get Victor Wembanyama. But will Detroit take Thompson's brother? Will they take Ozzer Thompson, or will they take Cam Whitmore? Will they take Taylor Hendricks? It's interesting. It's going to be very interesting because you do have, Cade Cunningham. So will they take Thompson's brother or not? It's going to be interesting. You can see it was a cool scene there with both the Thompson brothers. They were embracing right there. The one, it's always sad when you're not the one that's picked first, but still it's always a big deal seeing your brother get picked, and they are definitely happy for each other. That is a great scene to see. We've got another yes for Trayce Jackson-Davis in the 1st round. Thank you guys for participating in the poll. 83% of you guys think he will be selected in the 1st round. 17% say no. That's going to be interesting. That's one of those questions that really has me peaked for this draft. Will Trayce Jackson-Davis be a 1st round pick or not? Because he's just such an outlier. All the guys that have been taken so far, they're freshmen, or like guys like Scoot Henderson or Victor Wembanyama or Amen Thompson. Their age-wise fits them as freshmen. So far. But then you look at Jackson Davis, an older guy. It's going to be interesting. And the Detroit Pistons do select Ozzer Thompson. So they double dip back-to-back, went with the Thompson twin. Interesting right there. I think it can work because he does play more shooting guard. So I think they can fit together, Ozzer Thompson and Cade Cunningham. Positionally, though, with the length and the defensive versatility of Cade Cunningham and Ozzer Thompson, that's going to be a nightmare for NBA teams to be able to slow those guys down. It's going to be very hard for them to be able to defend those guys because of the fact, be able to score on those guys and be able to defend against them. Either way you go about it, it's going to be really tough for other teams to score on them. Ozzer Thompson, 6'7", 215 pounds. Cade Cunningham, 6'8", 6'9". Both those players are really tall, have a lot of length. It's crazy for sure that they went back-to-back. So our first five picks of the NBA draft this year, you've got Victor Wembanyama, then Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson, and the Thompson twins, Amen and then Ozzer, are the top 5 picks of this year's draft. A lot of people actually pegged these 5 to be the top 5. I think some were a little weird on the Thompson twins because of their shooting ability, but they're so athletic. And that's why they got taken. They're so athletic. And I think that a lot of these NBA teams, they like these G League teams. I think that's a big deal. They like these G League players, these overtime elite players, because they feel like they're just ready for the pros and the nature of it. And the fact that they're not really doing school, and they have where you've got to be able to play all the time and you're working out all the time. So it's almost like they feel like they're more ready. Being a college player is great too, because you get, to learn in school and all that kind of stuff. But it's really interesting though. Only one college player has been taken so far. And that's going to change because it's really about it with, the elite players like this with the Thompson twins, Scoot Henderson, then Victor Wembanyama from France. Only Brandon Miller out of Alabama was taken 2nd overall. That is going to change soon. You're going to start having the college players get taken. But it's interesting. Brothers drafted in the top 5 in the common area. You had the Alonzo and LaMelo Ball twins, and then the Amen Ozzer Thompson twins taken in the top 5. That's crazy right there. History being made right there. Very interesting for sure. But I really do appreciate all you guys for being here and participating in the poll as well with Trace Jackson Davis, whether he'll be selected in the first round or not. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. But most importantly, I do appreciate you guys for being here. This is going to be an awesome draft. We're only 5 picks in. We've got around, I think, 53 picks to go. I would say 55, but 2 of the picks are forfeited. I think for, maybe some violation of rules or whatever, 2 teams lost out on their pick. So we're only going to have 58 picks in this year's draft instead of the typical 60. But you're starting to getting to the Taylor Hendricks, the Cam Whitmores, Anthony Blacks, Jalen Hood-Schifino even. Players like that will be taken soon. Kassan Wallace. There's a lot of guys from the colleges that are going to be drafted very soon. I think some of these guys have the potential for sure to have a lot of success in the NBA. Some of these guys might not, though. You just never know. It's hard to peg whether these guys will have a lot of success or not. But I think that most of these guys have the talent. This is a very talented draft. I think more of the issue with some of these players is like they have a weakness, whether it's shooting or whether it maybe is handling the ball. It's like a Cam Whitmore, it's interesting. For example, he actually, has the ability to go off the dribble and he can shoot, but his assist numbers were low at Villanova. Now, whether that was because of the fact Villanova didn't have a lot of really talented players around, because a lot of them were hurt, like Justin Moore, other guys like that. Maybe that's what affected his assist numbers. But I do think looking at a player like Cam Whitmore, he's definitely going to have to improve at passing, or he will have some struggles in the NBA. You have to be able to pass. In this day and age, it's very hard to have a lot of success, in the league if you don't pass at a high level. You've got to be able to share the basketball with your teammates. You've got to be able to average at least a couple assists per game. I think he only had like 0.8 assists per game at Villanova, which is not going to get it done. It's going to be interesting. Buckeye Mike said, who could be an outlier for the remainder of the first round? I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think part of the poll with Trace Jackson Davis, he could be an outlier because he's an older guy. But there are other guys as well. It's an interesting question. We'll have to get back to you on that one. And the Orlando Magic, they select Anthony Black, point guard out of Arkansas. Very interesting selection. Anthony Black, theoretically the tallest point guard in the class, unless you count one of the Thompson twins. Anthony Black at 6'6". He has a lot of game. He only shot 30% from the three-point line at Arkansas last year. But he can shoot, in the mid-range. He's got mid-range game. He can get to the rim fairly well. He had high assist numbers at Arkansas. I think part of that helped in the fact that Arkansas was such a solid team last year. They had a lot of guys that could score, so that probably helped up Anthony Black's assist numbers. But he can rebound as well because he's got height, and he's a really solid defender. I think he averaged around 2 steals per game. 2 of the top defenders in this year's draft class are Anthony Black and Kassan Wallace. Jalen Hood-Schifino is a solid defender as well. But I do think that Anthony Black and Kassan Wallace are ahead of him anyway as the top 2 guards at defense in this draft. Now, Kassan Wallace is a better shooter than Anthony Black, but I think Anthony Black got taken because of his size. I mean, he's such a tall player for the point guard position. No, he's not a Cade Cunningham, but still being 6'6" and can do it all. Pass. He has the type of shooting ability that you feel like will improve eventually. So it's really interesting there for sure. Anthony Black, if he just improves at shooting and is a little bit less turnover prone. He did have some turnover issues. And I think part of that's due to his aggressive nature with the pass. When you pass a lot, you're going to have more turnovers. The more you have the ball in your hands, the more turnovers you are going to have. But I do think that Anthony Black is a guy that can cut down those turnovers. Just gets a little bit better shooting the three. He should be fine. So that's a good selection by the Magic. Very interesting selection. You can make an argument, that they could have taken someone else, but you can make an argument on almost any of these that, teams and players, they could have picked someone else. So I think Anthony Black, that's a really solid pick for sure. And we've got another vote in the poll. Thank you guys again for voting in the poll. You got, will Trace Jackson Davis be selected in the first round? 5 of you guys say yes. 2 of you guys say no. I'm about 50-50 on. I think it could go either way. It's going to be really interesting for sure. But it's also going to be interesting to see where these guys get picked. All these other players as well. Anthony Black, his dream has come true. He has been picked in the draft, the 6th pick to the Magic. Now we've got the Indiana Pacers on the board. The clock is ticking for them, and they've got a lot of question marks on their roster. They don't have as many question marks as they used to. The Pacers are starting to build a little bit for the future. They actually, you would think, have a shot to be able to have success in a couple of years if they can just draft a couple more solid players to be able to build around, Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield, some of those guys, Miles Turner. And they can get some couple more solid players, just some more bench depth as well. I feel like the Pacers could be a team that has a chance to make the playoffs soon. Now, they need a power forward. They need front court depth and three-point shooting. Now, if you're going to go with three-point shooting, then Cam Whitmore is your guy. Cam Whitmore can shoot the basketball, so they could go with him. But if you want the front court depth, then Jarris Walker's the right pick, because Jarris Walker is a beast. That guy is huge, 6'7", 250, and he can drive on anybody. His three-point shooting does need some work, and he has some weaknesses in other areas, but I do feel like overall that Jarris Walker would not be a bad selection. But the Pacers do need three-point shooting as well, so they could also go with Cam Whitmore. It's probably going to be either Cam Whitmore or Jarris Walker. I could see Taylor Hendricks as well. Taylor Hendricks is a possibility, but I do think that Cam Whitmore and Jarris Walker are the more likelier selections. Jeff says the Twins are very happy to be taken back-to-back. For sure. Definitely. I mean, that's awesome for sure that the other brother didn't have to sit too long. That's great for both of them. It was awesome to see them, be so happy for each other. Wow, the Indiana Pacers, they went with a guy that was not expected to be taken this high. That's crazy. Bilal Coulibaly from France, who is on the exact same team as Victor Wembanyama. He was 5'11" in 2020. He's now 6'8". They went with the shocker. They did not go with Cam Whitmore or Jarris Walker or Taylor Hendricks. They went with Bilal Coulibaly from France. He's a talented player. He was a guy that just a month ago was projected to be around 30th in the draft, maybe like in the 20s, but around the last month or so, he rose up the draft. And a lot of the draft, experts had him around the teens, around 15, maybe 12, but he got picked 7th by the Pacers. That is a interesting selection by the Indiana Pacers. I can't say it's a bad one at all because of the fact that Bilal Coulibaly has a lot of talent. I mean, he showcased it next to Victor Wembanyama. It's almost like being next to Victor Wembanyama might have helped them a bit. But he can shoot the three, so maybe they're going with the fact he can shoot the three ball. He can drive in the lane as well. It's a very interesting selection. We'll have to see how he performs in the NBA. But this was the first shocker pick. This was the first pick where it was like he was not supposed to go this high. No one really thought that was going to be the case, but they selected him. Has a 7'2" wingspan as well. So he's 6'8", and he's got a 7'2" wingspan. So his arms are 6 inches longer than he is in his height. That is always a big thing as well, because that means he's going to have a lot of success rebounding the basketball. He's going to get deflections. He's going to get steals due to his length. I don't think it's a bad pick at all. I think that it's definitely a pick that raises some eyebrows, and we're going to have to see how he performs in the NBA. But I do not think it is a bad pick necessarily. That's crazy. First shocker pick, definitely, for sure. Now we've got the Washington Wizards, who are in complete rebuild mode right now. They potentially could be maybe the worst team in the NBA, unfortunately, this next season record-wise, because they lost Bradley Beal to the Phoenix Suns in that trade. Chris Paul's not going to be with Washington. He's going to go somewhere else. And then you look at the fact Kyle Kuzma's declined his player option. He could be on the way out. If they don't keep a few of these guys, Washington, like I said, could be in complete rebuild mode. And it's going to be very interesting to see who Washington picks. I've seen some people have Cam Whitmore, if he was still available, being picked there. I even saw Jalen Hood-Schifino. I saw a draft, a mock draft that had Jalen Hood-Schifino getting picked here. I think that'd be maybe a bit high for him, but it definitely would give Jalen Hood-Schifino a lot of time to be able to play, a lot of playing time to be able to try to grow as a player, because Washington is not going to be probably a great team next year overall. Really, whoever gets picked here is going to play, I think. That's how, the non-depth that the Washington Wizards have. They just don't have a lot of depth. They need a player of any kind, and I think almost anybody that is like the next 5 available would be a solid pick for Washington. But we'll have to see who the Wizards pick. Adam Silver will be coming back out soon to do the pick, but we just had a shocker with the Indiana Pacers selecting Blue Colably instead of a player like a Cam Whitmore or a Jarris Walker. That was a crazy selection. But now you got the Washington Wizards. Will they go with a forward? You got, again, Cam Whitmore, Taylor Hendricks, and Jarris Walker available. Or will they go with a guard like Cason Wallace or Jalen Hood-Schifino? It's going to be interesting. Really, at this point, looking at the Wizards, again, they just need any type of player that they can get. Buckeye Mike says Cavs should spring on Jackson Davis. I mean, that would be interesting. That would definitely be interesting for sure, because of the fact, the Cavaliers, they are a team that you could say needs a center, potentially. I mean, that would be a really interesting selection. I don't think necessarily that it would be a bad idea for the Cavaliers to take him. I mean, I don't. I really think that they would be getting a good player in Trayce Jackson-Davis. I really think any team would. Chris Paul. Okay, Chris Paul. I did see that now. Trade to Golden State. I missed that earlier. Chris Paul acquired the ability to trade. He's traded to Golden State. Chris Paul is a Warrior. Unbelievable. So Chris Stapps, we know he went to Boston. Bradley Beal is going to Phoenix, and Chris Paul is going to the Warriors. That's crazy. I mean, hey, it gives Chris Paul a chance to win a title that a lot of people have been wondering if he's going to get, desperately looking for. I mean, Chris Paul is a fantastic player. He's been a fantastic point guard throughout his career, but his time's winding down, and he's running out of time. He's running out of time to get that title, but maybe the Warriors could be that team. It's going to be interesting with the whole Draymond Green situation. Will he still be with the Warriors? There's just so much movement going on with the NBA right now. It's so hard to keep up with all of it. The NBA is moving around all over the place. Players are moving everywhere, trying to keep up with it all. That's crazy. Buckeye Mike says, who in your opinion is the most set up to win right now? That's interesting. That's very interesting. I'll have to get back with you on that question. That's a good question. The Washington Wizards, though, they do select power forward Jarris Walker out of Houston. So Jarris Walker, he's going to get playing time. I can guarantee that for sure, because the Wizards are in a complete rebuild. Jarris Walker, though, he is a big athlete. 6'7", 250 pounds. He can shoot the three. It's definitely something that he needs to work on. He's not polished at the three-point shooting game, but he definitely has improved on it in the last couple years. From where he was in high school versus now, he has improved at the three-point shooting ability. But where he makes his bread and butter is driving to the hoop with his sheer athleticism and weight advantage that he has over most players that are similar positional size to him. He just has so much weight that he can bang with anybody. And the fact that he's a great defensive player. And part of that's due to length. When you're that tall, sometimes it just you're going to have success on the defensive end. But it's also about, just your capability of playing defense. It's not just enough to say, hey, I'm a 6'7" forward with long arms and I'm a great defensive player. You also have to have the skills and the technique. And that's something Jarris Walker does have. He's a smart player. He knows how to defend, and he fit right in to Kelvin Sampson's defensive schemes over at the Houston Cougars. That's why he went to Houston. Kelvin Sampson's a great defensive-minded coach, so Jarris Walker just fit right in. You see his stats. He only averaged 11.2 points per game, 6.8 boards, and 1.3 blocks on 47% field goal shooting. So some people will be like, that's underwhelming. Those aren't elite stats. They're not something that, like, Victor Wembanyama putting up over 20 points per game in his circuit in France. No, Jarris Walker only averaged 11 points per game. But again, his positional size and athletic ability are so sheer. The raw talent is so sheerly, elite at what he's able to do. Just the sheer talent. The raw talent he has, I definitely understand why he got picked this high. If it wasn't for the fact that he was as good of a defender as he was, then he would not have been picked this high. That shows you that Kelvin Sampson set him up well for the NBA. So definitely Jarris Walker has Kelvin Sampson to thank for that. For sure. Really interesting there. Buckeye Mike, that's big news. I can't believe CP3 will finally get his ring. I mean, you're right, he could. I mean, I don't know if it's guaranteed that he will, but it's definitely possible. It give him a better chance than when he was at the Suns. I agree with that. I mean, he's definitely going to have a shot with the Warriors. I mean, maybe you could say it would have been better for him maybe a couple years ago, but I still think that the Warriors with Curry and Clay, they still got a few more years left in them. But it's interesting. It is big news. I mean, the trades that have been going on in the NBA are insane. They're just completely insane with the amount of trades that have been happening. And you know, the type trades. These aren't small trades. They aren't petty little trades that, you know, you're sending a bench player somewhere else, or you're, you know, getting some draft capital for the future. No, you're just flat out big trades happening right before draft night. And it's not over yet with trades. There probably will be more trades to come, you know, in this offseason of the NBA. It's going to be crazy. But the Utah Jazz, they have the next pick in the draft. They have the 9th pick in the draft. They need a starting point guard is what they have listed on, you know, team needs on the TV. They've got Cason Wallace still on the board, Jalen Hood-Schifino. Those would probably be your 2 best starting point guards that they need. You know, you talk about that. I mean, maybe they could trade for one, but if you're talking about drafting one, it's probably either Cason Wallace or Jalen Hood-Schifino. It's going to be really interesting to see which team or which player that they pick, if that's the route that they go, if they go with a guard. Or will the Jazz go with a forward? Will the Jazz go with a forward? Because I think that the Jazz, yeah, they have also, you know, I think they have like the 16th pick in the draft. If they have the 16th pick in the draft, they could try to wait for Jalen Hood-Schifino and draft him there, and they could go with like Grady Dick, because they said they need 3-point shooting as well. The Jazz could go with Grady Dick right now, and then they could pick Jalen Hood-Schifino at 16. It's going to be interesting. The Jazz, though, they're a team that's kind of in rebuild mode after Quinn Snyder. He left for the Hawks. And then you look at the fact as well that you also lost Donovan Mitchell to the Cavaliers. You lost Rudy Gobert to the Minnesota Timberwolves to trade. So they're a team that definitely is in rebuild mode. But they need a starting point guard, and they need 3-point shooting. So if you're going to go with 3-point shooting, Cam Whitmore as well. You could go with Cam Whitmore or Grady Dick for the 3-point shooting, or you could go with Jalen Hood-Schifino or Cason Wallace for the starting point guard. It's going to be interesting. We'll have to see for sure. It's going to be really, really interesting. Buckeye Mike's to send Draymond to the Lakers. That'll be interesting. I mean, Draymond Green to the Lakers, I don't know if he'd fit at the Lakers. I mean, Draymond Green is a very unique player. He's one of those guys that he works in the system that he's in. I think that in a weird way, there's been some comparisons for Trace Jackson Davis to Draymond Green, because they're both forwards that their 3-point shooting isn't crisp and they're great passers. And Draymond Green works in the Warriors offense because he's surrounded by shooters like Curry and Clay and Jordan Poole, etc. Even Wiggins can shoot the 3. And in Draymond Green, if you put him on a different team, well, they utilize him in the same way. If they don't utilize him properly, then he could have a lot of struggles with his new team, and he could find his, you know, way where he's not even really playing that much in the NBA, and he's kind of like a bench player. And I mean, Draymond Green has skills. He knows how to play basketball, and he's good at the things that he's good at. But I feel like that the Warriors utilize him the best. So it's going to be interesting, but I don't know if Draymond Green going to the Lakers would be the best move. Probably not the best possible move that you could make, but it's interesting. So Jeff says the Warriors and Lakers are turning into retirement homes. I mean, hey, both the teams have a lot of older players. I mean, the Lakers were really bad a couple years ago. They were really bad. But, I mean, they've definitely got some younger guys like, you know, Rui Hachimura. They've got Austin Reeves, who's developed. They've gotten some guys, so it's interesting. But I do think that overall, to your point, Jeff, I mean, I think that the Warriors and the Lakers, you know, are two teams that are kind of like on the back end of, you know, players starting to get toward the end of their careers or like starting to decline, especially you could say the Warriors with Curry and Clay. It's going to be interesting with both those teams how their future unfolds because look at the Spurs. The Spurs, you had your big three with Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, guys like that, Tony Parker, and then they aged out, and the Spurs have been not very good for the last 6 years. But now they've got Victor Wembanyama, so maybe their fortunes will turn. But you do have a point, Jeff, right there. Buckeye Mike's pool is gone because the Paul trade pools in Washington. Okay, so I mean, to your point, when I was throwing out the names, I was just saying that Draymond Green worked with those players because they shot the three. But yes, you are right, Buckeye Mike. Jordan Poole is gone to Washington. So it's interesting. I mean, there's just so much stuff going on trying to keep up with everything. But yes, Jordan Poole is gone. But I was just throwing out the players that Draymond's been surrounded around for the last few years, and that is why he fit in their system. Will he fit with the Lakers? Just am not sure. The Utah Jazz pick is in, and Adam Silver says it's Taylor Hendricks, the forward out of UCF. So the Jazz, they did not go with the point guard. I guess they figure at that 16th pick that Jalen Hood-Schifino or Kassan Wallace will still be available, potentially. But they went with a forward out of UCF and Taylor Hendricks. I'm kind of shocked. They need three-point shooting as well. And Taylor Hendricks can shoot the ball. First player in UCF history to be selected in the first round as well. That's history being made right there. The first ever. That's crazy. But Taylor Hendricks can shoot the three, but Cam Whitmore probably shoots it at a higher rate, so I kind of felt like they would take him or Grady Dick. But no, they went with Taylor Hendricks. He's a talented player. He showcased a lot of skills at UCF. A lot of skills. So that's crazy. He definitely could help out the Jazz. If they get a good guard like Jalen Hood-Schifino or Kassan Wallace, the Jazz might be set. They definitely could be set. Last year, Hendricks averaged 15 points, 7 boards, and 2 blocks on 48% shooting. They're showing his film. I mean, he's talented. A guy his size can knock down the three at a really solid rate, and he's a good defender as well. That's one of the things about this draft. Most of the players can defend. There's not a lot of guys at the top of this draft that you can say just aren't really good at defense. Most of these guys are. Buckeye Mike said, I got you all good. Oh, you're good, man. You're 100% good. It's just there's so much stuff going on right now with all these trades. I mean, he can't even keep up with everything. Like, me and you weren't even sure with Chris Paul yet, And then Chris Paul, you see it on the screen. Oh, yeah, he's now with the Warriors. It's insane. And then with part of that trade, Poole's gone to the Wizards. It's crazy. You just got to keep up with all of it. So many trades are going on. But when you see, all these players on new teams once the NBA starts back up, it's definitely a bit of a shell shock, especially for guys that you're just so used to being on a team for the last few seasons. The Dallas Mavericks, they have the 10th pick in the draft, and they have on their remaining picks just this pick. They don't have any more picks after this one, so they have to make this one count. Who will they pick? You still have Cam Whitmore on the board. You've got Grady Dick, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Kassan Wallace, Bryce Sensabaugh out of Ohio State, Keontae George out of Baylor. Starting to go further down. Chris Murray out of Iowa, Kobe Buffkin, guard out of Michigan, Nick Smith Jr., guard out of Arkansas, and Jet Howard out of Michigan as well, are Jay Billis' 10 best players available. The Dallas Mavericks, though, they finished 38-44, and they were 11th in the West last year, and they had an epic collapse. They should have easily made the playoffs. But unfortunately for the Mavericks, they collapsed down the stretch. They need a wing defender and a center. Could they go with Derek Lively? Derek Lively's not on the best available list for Jay Billis yet, but you can see a guy like Derek Lively get taken because of the fact the Mavericks need a center. That's interesting right there. And then you also look at the fact that they need a wing defender. Maybe they could go with someone like Cam Whitmore. I mean, he's not as good of a defender as the other two that just got taken, like Jarris Walker and Taylor Hendricks, but he still is a guy that can defend because he's got positional size. So it will be interesting to see there. Buckeye Mike said, I didn't realize Cavs only have one pick. Lakers, come on, pick Jackson Davis. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think all those teams could take Jackson Davis. The Pacers could with their 26th pick. They had the 29th pick, but they traded it to the Nuggets, which was crazy. I think that the Pacers could take him. I think that you look at a team like the Kings, they could take Jackson Davis. Maybe the Lakers, you never know. It's going to be interesting. Jackson Davis, there's a lot of teams that he could get picked to. Right now on the poll, we still only have 7 votes on the poll. But will Trayce Jackson-Davis be selected in the first round? 71% of you guys say yes. 29% say no. So still the consensus for now with you guys is that Trayce Jackson-Davis will be picked in the first round. I mean, you just never know. I mean, it's one of those things where you just got to look at, a guy like Trayce Jackson-Davis. He's a player that if he was just a little bit, younger and he was a little bit better at shooting the basketball, he would easily be a first-round pick. Someone like Jalen Wilson out of Kansas. Jalen Wilson is a guy that if he was, a younger player and he was more consistent at shooting the ball, I mean, he can shoot the ball. He displayed those abilities, at Kansas. But if he was just a little bit better at shooting the ball, then I think that Jalen Wilson would be a higher pick as well. But he's being projected in the mid to late second round. And, I mean, he scored a lot of points last year, like 20 points per game with the Kansas Jayhawks. But since he is an older player and since he is a guy that looking at, the fact that he's not an elite shooter, I mean, he can, but he's not like great at getting past defenders as well. He's more of a slower, bodied guy, kind of guy where he can get downhill, but he doesn't have the elite speed. And that's why he's being projected at like the 45th pick. And he, on paper, should be a lot higher than that. Because you're like, how can a guy like Jarris Walker that only averages 11 points per game get picked over Jalen Wilson? Well, it's because Jarris Walker has elite size and the fact that he's a great defender and he's a freshman. A lot of times these teams go off potential. So it's really interesting for sure. The potential, I definitely understand, why teams go off of the potential because they're so young and they could really improve at a young age. But sometimes it's smart to take the older guys as well. It's really interesting. The Dallas Mavericks, though, on stage with the 10th pick. Who are they going to take? Adam Silver, he is up on stage. So the Pacers received Jarris Walker, 8th pick in 92, future second-round pick 2028. And the Wizards received Bilal Coulibaly. That's insane. So the Wizards in the pay, they have a proposed trade right there. We'll have to see if that trade does get finalized. There's a lot of stuff going on. We'll have to see if that trade will get finalized. And on the clock, the Dallas Mavericks do select Cason Wallace. Wow. Out of Kentucky. They didn't say they needed a guard. So is Kyrie Irving still going to be there? That's interesting because Kyrie Irving is a restricted free agent. And Cason Wallace is a guard, point guard. So maybe they're looking at the fact that maybe Cason Wallace could be the new point guard for him after Kyrie Irving won't be there anymore. That's interesting. That is really interesting right there. I cannot believe that. That's a shocking pick, actually. That's a really shocking pick. I thought that the Mavericks were going to go with, a wing player or maybe even go wild card with Derek Lively at center so they need a center. But no, they wanted the guard. So maybe that means they know that Kyrie Irving's not going to be there. That's interesting. But who knows if that Pacers trade with the Wizards will happen. That was a proposed trade, so that's not – I don't think that's officialized. But if the Pacers did get Jarris Walker instead of Bilal Coulibaly, that would be insane. But we'll have to see if that will get finalized. There's so much stuff going on with the draft right now, trying to keep up with it all. Cason Wallace at Kentucky last year averaged 11.7 points per game, 3.7 boards, and 4.3 assists on 45% shooting from the field, and 34% from three, and he averaged 2 steals. The good thing about Cason Wallace is that he is a really good defender. Again, I've been saying that all night long because for whatever reason, this is like the year of the draft where every single player that's been taken so far is a really good defender, which is crazy. Usually this isn't the case. Most of these guys, are great offensive players, and some of them have to work on defense. But Cason Wallace is a great defender. So that helps his case. And the fact that he is a guy that can shoot the three. He needs to work on it, but it is something he can do. And he's a good passer. He averaged 4 assists per game, so he can pass. The one thing about Cason Wallace, though, is unlike some other Kentucky guards that they've had in the past, he wasn't able to really completely lead the team. So will he be able to lead a team in the NBA? Will he be able to be the starting point guard? I'm not sure if that's the case, but he has the upside to do so. He's got great physical skills as well. He's got decent size at 6'3". So, I mean, I think Cason Wallace could work. But, again, the defense is where he's going to make his bread and butter in the NBA. He's a fantastic defender. And I do think that you can make an argument that the Mavericks made the right decision to draft him if Kyrie Irving is not going to no longer be there. So, very interesting pick. Jeff says Cason Wallace is really good. He is a really solid player. I mean, he wasn't, maybe as polished right out of the gate as some of the other guards that Kentucky's had in the past. But some of the guards that Kentucky's had in the past that did not have, elite success with the Wildcats end up having a great NBA career. Devin Booker is a prime example. It's not like, he lit it up at Kentucky, had a solid freshman year, but he went pro and he lit it up with the Suns. And you look at a guy like Cason Wallace going to the Mavericks. If he's at the Mavericks and somebody like Kyrie Irving's no longer on the team, that could help Cason Wallace get a lot of playing time right out of the gate and help him build confidence. So it could be a good spot for Cason Wallace. It'll be interesting to follow his career. I think all of these top 10 picks have a shot to be great in the league, but like always, there's always a few players that sometimes don't end up panning out. But I do think Cason Wallace has the opportunity to be a really successful player in the NBA. Now you've got the Orlando Magic with the 11th pick in the draft. They've already picked Anthony Black 6th overall, so they're probably not going to go with a guard this time. They need perimeter scoring and wing depth. Probably that would mean Cam Whitmore or Grady Dick would make sense here, because Grady Dick can shoot the basketball. I mean, that's his biggest asset. Is he a fantastic defender? That's the one thing about looking at Grady Dick. He's not as good of a defender as some of these other guys. Most of these guys in the draft are fantastic defenders. But a guy like Grady Dick is not as great of a defender. He can still play defense. It's not like he wasn't capable of defending guys last year with Kansas, but he is a guy that is much better on the offensive end. And since Anthony Black, a player that the Magic have already taken, that is a good defender, it would kind of make sense, you would think, to be able, to draft Grady Dick here. It could work. But you could also go with Cam Whitmore for Villanova for the size and the fact that he can play defense as well. So we're going to have to see. Right now, the 11th pick of the draft is in, and Orlando selects Jet Howard. That's another shocking pick. That is another shocking pick right there. Look at Jet Howard. He was not expecting it. His family erupted in cheers. You got Juwan Howard. You just saw John Calipari with Cason Wallace. Now you've got Juwan Howard with his son, Jet Howard. What a scene. You've got all these coaches and these players. It's always a big deal to see that for sure. But Jet Howard, his dream has come true. He is in the NBA. His father, Juwan Howard, played 21 seasons in the NBA. Who knows if Jet Howard will play that many seasons, but his dad sure did, and Jet Howard will have the opportunity to do so on an Orlando Magic team that really needs any type player they can get. So he could play a lot of minutes right out of the gate in the NBA. I thought they would go with someone like Cam Whitmore or Grady Dick, but they need shooting, and that's something that Jet Howard can do. But another thing that, talking about this draft, how most of these players are great at defense, Jet Howard is not very good at defense. He can improve, I think. I think that Jet Howard could get a lot better at defense, but at Michigan last year, that was not his strong point. But he can shoot the lights out of the basketball. He's a fantastic three-point shooter, and he's got great size, so he could develop into a better defender with time. I think he can. As long as Jet Howard becomes an average defender in the league, he'll be fine. He doesn't have to be an elite defender. His three-point shooting makes up for that. Jeff says, yeah, just like Devin Booker, he could be the star. He could be. You never know. He really could be, Jeff. I mean, I think that overall, looking at Cason Wallace, I mean, he could develop just like Devin Booker did and have a lot of success. It's going to be really interesting. But Jet Howard, they're showing his strengths, footwork and shooting range. The shooting range is unbelievable. I mean, the fact that he was able to take some of the shots that he did with the amount of attention that was drawn his way, because Michigan really struggled around him. Besides Hunter Dickinson Jett Howard and Kobe Buffkin, the rest of the team really struggled. So Jett Howard had to shoot a lot of threes that were highly contested, and he still made it work. Again, a fantastic offensive player. His defense is what he needs to work on, but his offense is fantastic, and I think will give him a shot to be able to have success in the NBA right out of the gate. Now we've got 8 votes in the poll. Will Trayce Jackson-Davis be selected in the first round? 75% say yes, 25% of you guys say no. Really interesting there. Will he be picked in the first round? Who else will be picked in the first round? There's a lot of other players that are still left to be picked. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Now they've got the Thunder. The Oklahoma City Thunder. They need three-point shooting as well and a shot blocker. Shot blocker would be a guy like Derek Lively at center. But if they need three-point shooting, probably Grady Dick or Cam Whitmore. The top 2 guys left on Jay Billis' best available board. It's going to be interesting. But Jett Howard with his dad, Juwan Howard, again, a cool scene there. But that is a massive selection by the Magic. I think he could have success, especially if he gets a little better at defense because his shooting is impeccable. RC talks NBA and WNBA. Jalen Suggs is definitely out the door now. We'll have to see on that. That's interesting. That's really interesting for sure. Definitely when players get drafted, a lot of people don't really think about the implications that it could have with other players that are currently on the roster. So we'll have to see if Jalen Suggs will be out or not. That's a really interesting situation there, RC, for sure. We really appreciate you guys for being here. All you guys, thanks so much. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Share the stream out on social media. Thank you guys so much for participating in the poll as well. We really appreciate you guys for being here. We are on the 12th pick in the draft. We have a long way to go. Still so many picks left. Around, I think, 46 are left. You got 58 picks. And we're on pick 12. So there's 46 picks to go. And again, they say the Thunder, they need three-point shooting. And they need a shot blocker. They're probably going to go with Grady Dick or Cam Whitmore. I'd be really shocked if one of these guys aren't selected. I don't think either of these guys are really going to last much longer on the board. It's really hard to fathom it. They're both so talented. There's only 3 spots left in the lottery. I mean, you could see the last 3 picks of the lottery. You could see potentially Cam Whitmore, Grady Dick, and Jalen Hood-Schifino. We'll have to see. Might not be. Maybe one of those guys falls out of the lottery, but they're all 3 players that most people were projecting to be, in the top, top 14. A lot of the other guys were kind of projected to be a bit lower, but those 3 guys were mostly projected to be lottery picks. We'll see if they get picked in the lottery or not. But definitely the Thunder with the 12th pick in the draft, you really can't go wrong here with the players that are still available. Still some really solid players that you can pick. I mean, even when you get to like the late teens, early 20s, sometimes you can find a diamond in the rough. Somebody that maybe just didn't shine too much in college, but has a lot of talent. So, I mean, there's still going to be guys, in the draft further down that could have a great NBA career. They just didn't get picked as high as some of these other guys. They didn't get picked like where Victor Wembanyama got picked or some of these other guys. They could be like the 25th pick in the draft and end up being great players. You see it all the time. Look at Nikola Jokic. He was the 40th pick. Chris Middleton was low. A lot of players, were not high draft pick. Jimmy Butler was in the second round. So many fantastic NBA players are picked in the second round or the late first round. So just because you're not a high pick does not mean you're not going to have success in the pros. For sure. There's still a chance for you to have success. But we're still waiting on the Thunder with their 12th pick. We're at a commercial right now. And there's a proposed trade with Dallas. I'm not sure if these proposed trades are actually happening, kind of like the Pacers one that they showed earlier with the Wizards. Not sure if that trade actually is happening or not. But you never know. It could. Sometimes when they say it's proposed, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It definitely could happen. It just probably means it's not finalized yet, or it's very likely, but they're just not 100% sure if it's going to happen. But the last 3 teams picking in the lottery, you've got the Thunder with the 12th pick, the Raptors with the 13th pick, and the Pelicans with the 14th pick. And all three teams are in interesting spots because the Thunder, they made the play-in tournament, and they're looking to improve. They're looking to get even better. And someone like, Chet Holmgren, who missed all last season, if he can, was able to come back and provide what, he was supposed to provide, for the Thunder last year, if he can play this season with Oklahoma City, I think that with some of these new picks they're getting, the Thunder could really take a leap forward. They could improve. But a lot of it's going to come down to whether Chet Holmgren actually can play. Then the Raptors, Fred VanVleet, he's on the way out. He's leaving, looking like he's out the door. And then Pascal Siakam could go. OG Anunoby could go. There's a lot of stuff going on with the Raptors right now. If they lose some of their guys, they're going to be in complete rebuild mode. And if Fred VanVleet's gone, they're going to probably need a guard. So, they could pick Jalen Hood-Schifino. I don't know if they will, but they could. And then the Pelicans with the 14th pick. They've got a solid team. They have potential definitely for sure to improve as well, just like a lot of these other teams that are lower. But definitely the Zion Williamson situation is a big deal. They're going to have to figure out what's going to happen with him, whether he's still going to be a part of their team in the future, whether he's going to be able to play for them. That's something they got to get figured out. And if they're not keeping Zion Williamson, then they're going to have to find a way to be able to trade him and get a lot in return. Because that's a big deal as well. You want to be able to get, a lot in return. But the Thunder, they have the next pick. 12th pick in the draft, and I'm sure that they are about to announce who it's going to be. That was a very interesting pick with Hassan Wallace. That was an interesting pick at number 10, definitely. A little high for some people thought he was going to go, but he is a really talented player, and he kind of fits what they're looking for. The Victor Wembanyama, no surprise he went first overall, but Brandon Miller went second, Scoot Henderson went third, and then so on and so forth. Now you've got Adam Silver. He's going up there on the stage. The 12th pick in the draft, the Oklahoma City Thunder select Derek Lively II. Derek Lively II got picked a lot higher than a lot of people were thinking, but see, he was the top center in the draft for most people with his shot blocking ability. He displayed almost no offense last year. His offense, he only averaged 5 points per game, but he also averaged around 3 blocks. He was great on defense, moving his feet. For a guy his size at 7'1", 7'2", he's a fantastic player with footwork. His footwork is fantastic, and he's a guy that will have a lot of success on defense in the NBA. I think that his defense will definitely help propel and keep him in the NBA. His offense needs to improve, but I think he has the potential to improve on the offensive end. And definitely that's why he got drafted where he did, because when you have the potential to improve, a lot of people are going to take a bet on you. But Derek Lively got picked at number 12 in the draft. Last season only averaged 5 points, 5 boards, and around 2.5 blocks on 66% field goal shooting. Those stats aren't great. When you're looking at the 5 points and the 5 rebounds, looking at those raw statistics, that's not ideal. That is not ideal at all. But, again, the defense is so good for Derek Lively, and the fact that there really weren't any other centers, unless you count Victor Wembanyama, obviously, to really pick. That's why Derek Lively moved up. If there were more great centers in this draft, Derek Lively probably would have moved down. But it's because of the fact that he is, he was one of the only centers in this draft that had a lot of potential. That's why he got picked as high as he did. 7'2", 218 pounds. He was the top recruit in the 2022 class, and he's got a lot of skills. And again, the shot blocking presence. He's a great defender. He's got a lot of things he needs to work on. Still a lot of things he needs to work on, especially on the offensive end. But the footwork's there. You never really see Derek Lively in the wrong spot. You never really can say that Derek Lively is in a bad spot and that he's not on the right spot on the floor like some, centers are, where you can say he's not where he needs to be. But I do think that Derek Lively does a great job of knowing where he needs to be on the floor. And that's why he got picked where he got picked. So Derek Lively II was the 12th pick in the draft. Now we're on to the Toronto Raptors, a team that, again, is in complete potential rebuild mode. I'm not saying that they are, if they can keep Siakam, if they can keep OG Anunoby, maybe not. But Fred VanVleet is possibly on the way out. Some of these other guys could possibly be on the way out. It's going to be interesting to see what the Raptors do here. They say they need guard depth. The top guard available, according to Jay Billis, is Jalen Hood-Schifino. Could they go with a forward and Cam Whitmore? But I do think they need guard depth. Shot blocking would have been achieved by Derek Lively, even though they really don't need another center. But they need guard depth. Maybe they could go with Grady Dick with the shooting, but I think they need, especially if VanVleet's out, they need a guy with ball handling skills, and that could be Jalen Hood-Schifino. We'll have to see if the Raptors do select him. It would make a lot of sense if they did for what they need right now, but it's going to be really interesting for sure. We'll have to see. Something to monitor in the next couple minutes. They have not gotten the pick in yet. The clock is still ticking with the Raptors. But the ironic thing about Toronto is this is their only pick. So they've got to make it count. They have no other picks in this draft unless they trade for them. They have no other picks. This is their only pick, the 13th pick in the draft. But Derek Lively, he was the 12th pick. And because there was a lack of centers in this draft, that helped boost Derek Lively up the board. And his defensive versatility, his footwork is impeccable. And that definitely helped him out tremendously. Most of these picks haven't been too shocking. I will say Derek Lively getting picked as high as he did was a bit shocking, even though we had a feeling he wouldn't move up because there wasn't really that many other great centers. The Bilal Coulibaly selection was big at 7 to the Pacers, unless they are trading to the Wizards. That was a big selection. Cassandra Wallace at 10 a little bit, but most of the other picks, make sense. They make sense. The other ones, though, all those two were interesting. Derek Lively and Bilal Coulibaly, but all the others make sense where they got picked. Kind of where people were expecting them to be picked, and by the teams who picked them because they needed players of that certain skill set. So it's really interesting for sure with all these draft selections, but I do think that most of these picks have made relative sense anyway. But we are at the Toronto Raptors. We're about to find out where they're going to potentially get picked. It's going to be very interesting for sure. We'll have to see. Buckeye Mike's house, though, I thought Jalen Suggs was pretty good as a player. Yeah, me too, Buckeye Mike. I'd have to agree with that. I mean, Jalen Suggs is a great player. I think that he was really solid. I mean, maybe it just doesn't fit, with what they have right now. Maybe with adding who they've added, maybe Jalen Suggs doesn't fit anymore, as to RC's point, but he is a pretty solid player. He definitely has talent, so it would be interesting to see if he's not going to be on the team anymore. But they're showing right now the Raptors situation. Fred VanVleet, unrestricted free agent. It's going to be interesting what happens with him and then potentially the rest of the team. Are they going to blow the whole thing up, or are they going to try to salvage the team and keep as many of the players that they have on the team? It's going to be really interesting. With the Raptors, they have the 13th pick in the draft. And they're about to select in a minute. And they need guard depth. So could this be Jalen Hood-Schifino's turn, or could it be someone else? Adam Silver's coming up on the stage to announce the pick. Who are they going to go with? They need a guard. They'll probably take Schifino. But if they also could select a forward as well, we'll have to see. And they went with a guard, but they did not go with a point guard in Jalen Hood-Schifino. They went with Grady Dick. They went with Grady Dick out of Kansas, the shooting guard. That's interesting. I mean, using that logic, you would think that Fred VanVleet's not going anywhere. But I do think that Fred VanVleet is going to be on the way out. But that's crazy. Grady Dick out of Kansas. And the other thing that's interesting about the selection is that the Raptors are a team known for their defense. All their players have defensive versatility. Grady Dick's not a fantastic defender. He can defend, but it's definitely not a strong point by any means. So maybe that's showing a shift, in priorities for the Raptors. Maybe they're going to go with players that maybe they is not as crisp on the defensive end, or maybe they went with Grady Dick because they have a team full of great defensive players. Maybe they could go with a player that was better on the offensive end. Who knows what their thought processing was? But Grady Dick, that is a very interesting selection. right there by the Toronto Raptors, going with a type player that they don't normally draft. That's crazy. They do not normally draft guys that are better on the offensive end. They usually always go with players that are better on the defensive end. That's crazy. I mean, I think it could work. I mean, Grady Dick, he's an elite shooter. And, I mean, that's something theoretically that the Raptors needed. I mean, you talk about one thing that they needed three-point shooting. And I feel like, Jalen Hood-Schifino, maybe if he was a bit better of a three-point shooter, maybe they would have taken him. But since Grady Dick is such a great shooter, and the fact that the Raptors do struggle shooting the three ball, maybe that's why he got selected. I think it's not a bad move at all. It's interesting, though. It's definitely interesting considering what the Raptors normally draft. But I think Grady Dick can have success up there in Toronto. But we'll have to see what Toronto does with their roster. But Grady Dick, he's definitely happy for sure. That's a big deal for him. But now, we're on to the 14th pick. The New Orleans Pelicans are on the board. The last team in the lottery. And they say on there, New Orleans needs a traditional point guard. Interesting. RC says, what's the difference between Grady and a Doug McDermott, JJ Redick, and Kyle Korver? I guess we'll find out. That's a good point. I don't think much, to be honest. I mean, maybe Grady Dick can show more versatility off the bounce. But like to your point, Doug McDermott, J.J. Redick, and Kyle Korver, I mean, that could end up being what Grady Dick is, RC. You could be right. That's a great point. That could be about the ceiling that he has there. But those are really solid players. It's not like that those will be, it would make Grady Dick's career not go that well if you're going to be compared to J.J. Redick, Kyle Korver, Doug McDermott. That's a solid career. That is definitely a solid career. But I would have to say I don't think that there's much difference. No, for sure. But the Pelicans, though, with the next pick, they said they need a traditional point guard. There's not a lot of traditional point guards left on the list. I mean, you look at guys like Nick Smith, Kobe Buffkin, Colby Jones, Jordan Hawkins. All those guys are shooting guards. There are not a lot of point guards left. This could be where Jalen Hood-Schifino gets taken off the board. I thought the Raptors were going to take him, but he could get taken by the Pelicans. Well, after they need a rim protector, and they need a traditional point guard. There's not a lot of point guards left, though. I mean, it could be Schifino's turn. I mean, you got Keontae George, but he's more of an Eric Gordon type player. He's a big-bodied guard who takes a lot of contact. He's not a great passer. So it's interesting. And they're showing the Zion Williamson conundrum. I mean, when he plays, Zion Williamson is definitely one of the top players, at least athletes anyway, in the league. It's fantastic, but he's missed 194 games due to injury. Zion Williamson has missed more than 2 seasons of NBA action, and he's only been in the league for 4 years. So he's missed more games than he's played in. That's not going to cut the mustard. Definitely, the Pelicans need to figure out what they're going to do with Zion Williamson and then move on from there. That is key. If they can find out what they're going to do with him, then maybe they can move forward and be able to potentially, after that, know what they're going to do, with the rest of their team and moving forward and trying to be a playoff, contender year in and year out. But with Zion on the bench, it's just unfortunately not going to do him any good. He's definitely going to have to play. I mean, they're showing the Pelicans with and without Zion. Games with him, 114. Without him, 194. Win percentage with him, 50%. Without him, 43%. Points per game, 116. With him, 111 without him. I mean, they're definitely better with them, but I mean, it's not super substantial either. But probably it's not super substantial because they don't have like the chemistry with him because he's never in. He's never available. That could be part of the problem there. But the Pelicans, they have a lot of questions. They can solve one of those questions with this 14th pick in the draft. Who will they select? This is the last lottery selection, and it's always a big deal to get picked in the first round, but there's something special about being picked in the lottery. Something very special indeed. It holds more weight for sure. And this is the only pick for New Orleans. This is their last pick, remaining pick here. So like the Raptors, they have to make it count. They do not have any more picks. Who will they take? You still got Bryce Sensabaugh, Keontae George on the board, Chris Murray, Kobe Buffkins is Jay Billis, but I do think if you're going to go with the traditional point guard, Jalen Hood-Schifino is the Pelicans guy. I think that's who they should draft if they need a point guard. But we'll have to see. It's surprising Cam Whitmore's still on the board. I think the reason Cam Whitmore hasn't gotten taken is I think a lot of teams were looking at his assist numbers. The fact that he only averaged 0.8 assists for Villanova last year, I think really hurt him. He's a great shooter, and he's a great driver. He'll get taken soon, but it's the passing. The passing hurt him. I think the passing really hurt him. Just like with Schifino, I feel like if Schifino just shot the ball a little bit better, he probably would have been taken. But it is what it is. It's a really interesting argument with both players. Crazy. The top two players left on the board, according to Jay Billis. But obviously, all these players that are on his board left, they will be drafted for sure. Not to worry for them at all. So Adam Silver, he's coming up for the last lottery pick. Who will the Pelicans take with the 14th pick in the draft? Are they going to go with a guard or are they going to go with someone else? It's going to be really interesting. They're showing the proposed trade. Mavericks received 12th pick tonight. Derek Lively. Thunder received Kassan Wallace. So if that trade's happening, then the Thunder are going to get Wallace. That's interesting. That's really interesting right there. If that trade is true, I think it is. Whenever they show it on screen, it usually means that's the case. And the New Orleans Pelicans select Jordan Hawkins out of UConn. Wow. That's not a point guard right there. They need a traditional point guard, but they went with a shooting guard. I mean, Jordan Hawkins, he's a guy that he's a great shooter, and I think it helps his case in the fact that he won a title. That always helps. When you win a title, you know, winning the national championship with the Huskies this past season probably helped boost him up the board. He's in tears. It's awesome to see him embraced with his family. That's one of the greatest things about the draft. It's just seeing all these guys, their dreams get to come true. Jordan Hawkins, a great player, fantastic shooter. Definitely helped. Can't say lead the team. I mean, you got to look at someone like Adama Sanogo. Felt like he led the team, but Jordan Hawkins was very influential in helping UConn. He had a big impact on the Huskies, and he's the cousin of Angel Reese, who was a fantastic women's college basketball player. So that's crazy as well. Got great bloodlines. Jordan Hawkins, I think it's a good addition. I mean, it's a solid addition for sure. 109 3-point shots made. So he hit more threes than almost anybody else in college basketball. Again, they're showing he's an elite shooter. Last season, he averaged 16 points, 4 boards on 41% from the field, 39% from three. That 3-point shooting percentage is why he got drafted this high. That is fantastic. He's an elite shooter. He does struggle in other areas, though. I mean, is he a solid defender? He can defend, and he can pass, but it's not his strongest point. He's a great shooter. They're comparing to Richard Hamilton, who also played with the UConn Huskies back in the day. But now the Atlanta Hawks are on the board. Kind of a wild card pick there, taken by the Pelicans, taking Jordan Hawkins. Kind of interesting right there. Also comparing Jordan Hawkins to Ray Allen. That's a great comparison. Ray Allen is a great shooter. Yeah, they're kind of similar. You look at the way they're moving around on the floor. You kind of can see the comparisons with Ray Allen and Jordan Hawkins. Interesting. I think that Jordan Hawkins could have a really good NBA career. All he's got to do is keep that shooting up and then just improve some on defense. Improve some as well at passing the ball. But it'll be interesting. The Atlanta Hawks, though, they have the 15th pick. And their pick is in. They say they need 3-point shooting. Need some rim protection. You're not going to get much rim protection at this stage of the draft. There's not a lot of centers. I mean, unless you take someone like Trace Jackson Davis, who's way lower in the draft. And by the way, we still got that poll out. 8 votes are in. Appreciate you guys for participating. Will Trace Jackson Davis be selected in the first round? 75% yes, 25% no. But definitely don't think just because the Hawks need rim protection that they're going to go with a Trace Jackson Davis route. So I don't think they're going to take him. They need rim protection, but they'll probably try to get that somewhere up. But 3-point shooting, Cam Whitmore could be that guy. He's a good shooter. They could take Cam Whitmore. They could also take Chris Murray. The Hawks could take Chris Murray. I mean, he's a really good 3-point shooter as well. Jeff says, interesting night so far. I agree. It's been some interesting picks. I mean, definitely, it's what happens in every draft. I mean, guys are taken that you just don't really expect in certain spots. I mean, it's been kind of predictable, but I will say the last few picks have started to kind of change that. It was very kind of predictable at first. It was kind of going the way you thought it would, but the last few picks have kind of been all over the place. Especially with some of these teams and the team needs that they have on the board. A lot of these picks have not been really going what these teams have needed. So it's crazy, that they aren't really going with team needs. Some of these guys, some of these teams, though, take guys that they just feel like will help their team the most, even if it's not like a team need. Sometimes they're just like, you know what, we like this guy because his skill set it's just too much to pass up on. So maybe with Jordan Hawkins, kind of like with the Pelicans, they felt like, his three-point shooting ability, he's so good at threes that we need to take this guy. So, I mean, that could be the case. That could be exactly the case right there. So it's really interesting. But we'll have to see who the Atlanta Hawks take. We're outside the lottery, so the lottery is over, but that does not necessarily mean, that just because you're not taking the lottery, still these remaining picks, it's a big deal as well. It is definitely a big deal. But you've still got a few from the green room left. Players like Cam Whitmore, Jalen Hood-Schifino, those guys, they're still in the green room, waiting to be picked, and they get to walk on stage. And then you're just going to start getting to some of the players that are not there. Everybody taken so far was selected for the green room. But it's crazy. Adam Silver, he's coming back out. So we're about to get the 15th pick in the draft. The Atlanta Hawks, they select Kobe Buffkin. They select Kobe Buffkin out of Michigan. That's another bit of a wild card there. Not a bad pick. Kobe Buffkin is a really solid shooter. He really developed at Michigan, especially over the last half of his sophomore year. He can handle the ball. He's definitely not a point guard, but he can handle the ball. And he's also a guy that can shoot the three at a pretty high rate, and he can get to the rim. He doesn't have, like, the best positional size in the world. Like talking about, like for a shooting guard, like a lot of shooting guards these days are like 6'5", 6'6", and they're like 215 pounds. But Kobe Buffkin, he's like 6'4", and he's like 185 pounds. So he's a little bit on the smaller size weight-wise and maybe a little bit smaller on the height, but he definitely is a guy that has a lot of game. Very skilled. I think he can help Atlanta. He averaged 14 points, 4.5 boards, and 3 assists, 48% shooting. So he kind of provides you a little bit of everything. He's one of those type players. He doesn't really do anything badly. Pretty solid defender. Not an elite defender, but he can defend. He can pass. He's a pretty solid rebounder. So he's got good size. It's just the key for him is going to be the weight. Can he find a way to be able to bang in the NBA? Being on the smaller side. That's going to be really interesting. High energy defender. He can defend. Again, he's got defensive skills much more than Jet Howard. But Jet Howard shoots the ball better than Kobe Buffkin. But Kobe Buffkin can still shoot the three ball. So just all around a really solid addition for Atlanta. I like the selection. Didn't think they were going to go with him, but that is a solid pick. I think he can help the Hawks. Now you've got the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz, they have the 16th pick. And we talked about earlier that the Jazz, they kind of need a guard. And they went with, a forward earlier. So we'll have to see if this time they take a guard. They're showing the improvement from Kobe Buffkin, though. He only averaged 3 points per game as a freshman, 14 points per game as a sophomore, 22% from three, 36% from three as a sophomore. Those are massive improvements, and I think that's a big reason why, Kobe Buffkin got selected as high as he did, because he did improve so much. And that shows you a guy that is on the upward trajectory. And when you're on the upward trajectory, it's a lot easier for a team to want to select you because of the fact that you improve so much in your one extra year in college that they feel like you're going to improve in the NBA as well. It happens a lot. There's a lot of players that have come back just one extra year, in college, improved by a lot, and then they end up having a lot of success in the NBA. So it's interesting. It really is interesting for sure. We'll have to see how well Kobe Buffkin does in the pros, just like with the rest of these guys. All these guys, just because you're picked does not mean you're going to have a lot of success. You have to be able, to put your talents to good use and be able to have success in the league. Or you won't last for sure, even if you're a high pick. There's a lot of guys, even in recent drafts, that have been taken in the top 10 that aren't even really playing anymore. Several examples of that. Jared Culver comes to mind. I think he's a guy that still could really have success, at the NBA level, but he just has not really gotten a chance. And he was like the 6th pick in the draft a couple years ago. But they're showing with Utah, their pick is in, and they say they need a point guard. Could they go with Jalen Hood-Schifino? And right on cue, Jeff says, wonder when Schifino will go. I don't know. It's a little shocking he's still available. I mean, some people thought maybe that he would be. It kind of seemed like Schifino, a lot of people were a bit, indecisive on him. Some people thought he'd be a top 12, top 13 pick. Other people thought that he would maybe be around 17, 18. But I don't think he's going to last much longer. I've been saying like the last few picks thought he would be taken because these teams needed a point guard, but they've gone a different route. Victor Wembanyama is the first number 1 pick without a college background since 2006. That's crazy. That's a long time ago. I think he could have a lot of success. He could have a fantastic NBA career as long as he just stays healthy. That's going to be the key. For a guy his size and the weight that he's at, you got to stay healthy. Because if you don't stay healthy, then it just completely derails your career. It's really unfortunate. I mean, you don't want to see that happen to anybody. But definitely with a guy like Victor Wembanyama, you got to look out for the injuries. You got to look out for his health. Just like Chet Holmgren as well. Chet Holmgren, unfortunately, did not stay healthy last year, for the Thunder, and he didn't get to play. And now maybe he'll be able to play this year, but we've missed a whole year of potentially seeing Chet Holmgren. So it's just one of those deals when you're that tall, you've got to be able to stay healthy if possible. It's very tough sometimes when your knees can give out or you have foot injuries. It's just, it's really, really sad to see. But hopefully Victor Wembanyama can avoid all that, because if he does, he should have a great career. Second tallest player drafted first overall all time. At 7'5", Yao Ming at 7'6" and 02. And Yao Ming was great for a few years. He was very dominant for a few years. And then, unfortunately, the injury bug got him, and then he just didn't last. It's unfortunate. But Yao Ming was great when he entered the league. He was fantastic. The Jazz, their pick is in. They need a point guard. Will they take Schifino or will they go with someone else? I don't think they would go, if they're going with a point guard, I don't think they would go with like a Nick Smith at Arkansas. He can, play, a little bit, I guess you could say handle the ball a little bit, but he's not a point guard, so I don't think that they would go that route if they're going with a point guard. If the Jazz are going with a point guard, they'll probably take Schifino. If they're not going with a point guard, then they could go with a Cam Whitmore. Still crazy that Cam Whitmore is still available. Again, I know the assist number, 0.8 assists, is low, which is probably why he's still available, but that's tough. That is really tough right there for Cam Whitmore. He thought he'd be picked a lot higher. Some people had him as like the 6th pick, and we're at 16. At least with like Schifino was projected at around like 11 or 12, and he ended up going, he's still available, and he could go 16 right here. Or he's probably going to be in the top 20, you would think, but that's not as bad as like Cam Whitmore, who was projected to be like 6th or 7th by some people, and he's still available at 16. But definitely Whitmore and Schifino are the top 2 guys left. You would think they would get off the board soon. And the Jazz need 3-point shooting as well. They need a starting point guard. They need 3-point shooting. They could go with Cam Whitmore or even Chris Murray. Even they could go with Chris Murray. If they want 3-point shooting, those are your guys right there, Cam Whitmore and Chris Murray. But if they want a point guard, then Schifino's their guy. So it's going to be interesting. It's really going to be interesting to see what the Jazz do. They're a team that's in an interesting spot. They're not one of the worst teams in the NBA, but they're also kind of in rebuilding mode as well. They were 37-45 last year. They were 12th in the West. They missed the playoffs, but they weren't that far from missing the playoffs. They were only 3 games back. So, I mean, all it could take for the Jazz is a couple of additions, and they're right back in the playoffs. They're not that far away. So this pick will be very important. It's just going to come down to what the Jazz want and need. Do they want shooting, or do they want a point guard? Be very interesting to see. Some of these picks, though, lately have been kind of out of left field. So this one could be as well. We'll just have to see. They're talking to Victor Wembanyama right now. And he had a really cool interview. It was a big deal for him getting picked number 1. Just awesome stuff right there. But Adam Silver, he's up there. And he says that the Utah Jazz are taking Keontae George out of Baylor. That's interesting as well. Keontae George can shoot. The three-point shooting, if that's what they want, is three-point shooting. Keontae George can shoot the ball, but he was highly inefficient at Baylor. I think part of the reason that you could say he was highly inefficient is because of the fact that Baylor didn't really have a lot of great shooters around him. And he's also one of those type players where he doesn't have elite downhill speed, so he kind of has to force up shots because of that. He has to compensate for the fact that he doesn't really have, great downhill ability on his own. He can go downhill. He does have the ability to get downhill with his body because he does have great size with his weight, kind of like Eric Gordon. That's why he's compared to him. He's very similar to him. But he was inefficient at Baylor. His shooting numbers were very low, and that's because he took a lot of poor shots. But I do think that Keontae George offers Utah a player that has the potential to fill it up on any given night. He has the potential to go for 25. He's not going to consistently do that. Like last season, he averaged 15 points, 4 boards, 3 assists. He's not going to consistently score 25 points, but he can. I don't think it's a bad pick. It's a very interesting pick. I was not expecting that pick, but not a bad pick at all whatsoever for Utah. He can create space with his weight, crafty score, shooting range. He does have shooting range. Just has to get a little bit better with his shooting percentage, but not a bad pick for Utah. Jeff says, I'm shocked on some of the picks, but they are all really good players. For sure. I mean, that's the key. All these players are really good. And when someone, slips down the board like a Cam Whitmore, it doesn't mean Cam Whitmore isn't a good player. It's just, for some reason, teams just did not prioritize him. Or there was another guy that they wanted over him. It doesn't mean at all that, some of these guys that aren't picked yet aren't good at all. There's still really good players left on this board. But yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. I am shocked by some of these picks as well. But they all are really good. I agree with you. But the Lakers are up next. The Los Angeles Lakers. They have the 17th pick. We'll have to see who they take. RC says Jaime Jaquez Jr. or Cam Whitmore. That's a good question. RC, that's a really good question. I mean, I think overall, Cam Whitmore probably makes more sense to be picked first because of the fact that he is a freshman and a lot of these teams draft off potential. But then you look at Jaime Jaquez, and he's got the experience playing all those years at UCLA. And Jaime Jaquez is a smart player. I mean, he's not the quickest guy in the world, but he uses leverage. He knows how to create space, and he can bully his way to the rim. He can shoot the three. It's something that he improved at UCLA. He could not shoot threes that well early on in his career, but he got better at it. So I would probably have to go barely with Cam Whitmore on that one, RC, just because of the potential factor and the fact he did play really well for Villanova. But I mean, we're kind of getting to the point in the draft where it's like some of these teams are more win now, and that's where you would take Jaquez. Cam Whitmore would be better for a team that's rebuilding. So I think that's how I would answer that. If you're a team that's rebuilding, go with Cam Whitmore. If you're a team that is looking for a win-now player, Jaime Jaquez makes more sense because he is a guy that is an older player that will be able to fit right into the NBA and probably play alongside stars. Jeff says, I hope Jalen Hood goes to the Heat. That would be cool for the Heat. That would be a really good addition. I mean, the Heat were not a team that I think a lot of people were projecting Jalen Hood-Schifino to go to. But at this point, he's one of the best players available. So you never know. Maybe the Heat might bite on him. But the Lakers, I mean, they said they need three-point shooting. They could go with Cam Whitmore. Cam Whitmore is a really talented player. Again, his assist numbers needs to improve. There are certainly things that he needs to improve on. But Cam Whitmore is a really talented player that a lot of people were projecting to go higher than this. So whenever you have a guy that was projected to be higher than what they're at right now, this is like the right spot to take them because they're really talented. They're really talented players. They just haven't been taken yet. And there's always a few players that slip through the cracks and go a lot lower than you think. It happens every single year. But it's going to be really interesting. The Lakers, they're a team that is kind of like in the middle. They're not rebuilding, but they're not contending either. They're kind of in the middle. So what do they want? Do they want a forward like Cam Whitmore? Do they want a shooting guard like a Nick Smith or even a forward like Chris Murray? Do they want another ball handler like Jalen Hood-Schifino? There's a lot of things that you could do here. Go Tigers. Thanks, Edward. Really appreciate it. Great job. Keep it waiting till 25 for sure. Definitely know why, but I appreciate you for being here, Edward. Trying to get through these picks. Right now we're on commercial, but the Lakers pick is in, so we will know their pick soon. But it's been a good draft. I mean, a lot of these players, they've been picked to good situations for them, which is always what you want to see. You want to see players get drafted to teams that need players of their skill set so they'll get a chance. Because if a team drafts a guy they don't really need, then he's not going to play. So it's always smart for these teams to draft guys that, overall, you need that guy. You need his talent for what he can provide, and then he's going to get playing time. So I think a lot of these guys have been drafted in great situations, and that is always what I'm looking for sure when watching the draft. You want to see guys be able to get picked to spots that it would be, the best possible spot for them to go to. Go Tigers says Grady Dick's suit is awful, not going to lie. I mean, I can say that it stood out, It stood out. You could definitely see it from a mile away. But, I mean, I wouldn't wear it. It's definitely not something that I would wear for sure. That's funny. Go Tigers. I like that small 4'6'7" guy from Arkansas. I'm thinking you're referring to Jordan Walsh there. Jordan Walsh is a really talented defender. I mean, he's a guy that his offense needs to improve, but it's kind of like Derek Lively. He got taken higher than a lot of people thought just because of his defense and his size. But Jordan Walsh is a great defender, and he's a guy that I think would really work, with a lot of teams due his skill set. So, I mean, to your point, I think that overall, Jordan Walsh is a guy that I think can have a lot of success, especially if he just improves somewhat on offense because his defense is that good. So he's a really good player. Go Tigers said, yeah, he would be good for the Celtics. Yeah, I mean, the Celtics, they're in an interesting spot because they didn't have to make many moves. I mean, as long as the Celtics could physically pay everybody, they really didn't have to make many moves. But they got Kristaps and they traded Marcus Smart, which still is tough for a lot of Celtics fans. I know it's tough for you, Edward, for sure, because of the fact that he's a guy that, just has been a stalwart with the Celtics for so long. The Los Angeles Lakers select Jalen Hood-Schifino out of Indiana. That's shocking. That is really shocking right there. I did not think that the Lakers were going to select Jalen Hood-Schifino. They didn't really need, a point guard right there. I didn't think. They said they kind of needed a ball handler, but I didn't think they needed like a player of Jalen Hood-Schifino's talent. I felt like maybe they were going to go more with like a Cam Whitmore, like a forward. But they picked Jalen Hood-Schifino. He embraced with Mike Woodson, head coach of Indiana, who's definitely done a great job rebuilding that program for sure and helping Jalen Hood-Schifino get drafted. He wasn't a lottery pick, but he still got drafted in the top 20. He is finally off the board. That's a big selection for the Lakers. That's a really shocking selection. If Buckeye Mike's still here, I'm sure that he's pretty happy with the pick. But that's crazy. That's a really crazy big. Jalen Hood-Schifino was Big Ten Freshman of the Year. He averaged 13 points per game. He averaged 4 rebounds and 4 assists. 33% shooting from three. Definitely needs to work on his three-point shooting. But he's a great passer, and he's got great size at 6'4", 215 pounds. So he's got great size. So for the Lakers, they got a really good player with Jalen Hood-Schifino and a player that at this stage in the draft, one of the best players still available on the board. Interesting. Pick and roll playmaker. Yeah, he's one of the best pick and roll guards in this draft. Definitely something that Mike Woodson utilized to help him get to the pros. I mean, he's a great pick and roll player. Him and Jackson Davis, who is still on the board, definitely were great in the pick and roll all year long. He can shoot the three. He's a bit streaky from three, but he can shoot the three. He had a big 35-point game as well against Purdue, so he can fill it up from time to time, but it's definitely a very interesting selection by the Los Angeles Lakers. Jalen Hood-Schifino, 6'5" guard out of Indiana, taking number 17. He's going to the Lakers. Jeff says, wow, that's crazy. I agree. It's crazy for sure. I was definitely not expecting the Lakers to take him. I thought that he would go like to the Raptors or he would go to the Hawks or something like that, or even the Jazz, but he got picked by the Lakers. I think he definitely can help the Lakers. Go Tigers says, I want to see what Boston does with that 25th pick. Trey Marcus heard he was the heart and soul of the Celtics. For sure. That's the thing, Edward. You're absolutely right. Nailed it on the head. That's what Marcus Smart is. He's the heart and soul of the Celtics. Like Draymond Green leaving the Warriors. I know that it's not exactly the same, but like Draymond Green, is just so ingrained with the Warriors that would he work anywhere else? He's just so important to the team and what he does and everything. So it's crazy for sure. I'm putting the StreamYard link in the chat if you like to talk, Edward, about some of the drafts so far, if you want to. But definitely, it's been a crazy draft so far. But Jalen Hood-Schifino, the 17th pick in the draft to the Los Angeles Lakers. He's got a big smile on his face. He embraced with Mike Woodson just like Jet Howard did with his dad, Juwan Howard, Kassan Wallace with John Calipari. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for the coaches to see their players get to go pro like that. It's always a big deal. Very heartwarming moment, and then the players get to embrace with their families as well. It's just always so cool to see these guys' dreams come true. You just cannot beat it because it just does not happen, for everybody. You could be a great player, never get a shot to go pro. But these guys, all their dreams are getting fulfilled. But you can say almost the easier part is over. The hard part is coming up. The hard part where you got to do everything you possibly can to stick in the league, or otherwise it's not going to matter. They're showing Cam Whitmore right now, forward from Villanova. It would have been the exact same thing for Jalen Hood-Schifino if he wasn't taken by the Lakers. The longer that you are on the board, it gets a little upsetting. I mean, because you were expecting to go higher. Cam Whitmore, he's just got to hang in there. He'll get picked soon. He's a good player. He's a really good player. So many guys left on the board that are going to have massive roles in the NBA next season. I mean, you look at a guy like Chris Murray. Will he have the impact Keegan Murray had? Who knows? But I think it is possible that he could. Or Bryce Sensabaugh. He could have a big impact next year. Cam Whitmore could. So many good players left. And the Heat, they need a guard, they said, and they need front court depth. So they could go with Cam Whitmore. They need front court size. They need guard depth. It's interesting. It's really interesting for sure. Cam Whitmore still available. Bryce Sensabaugh, Chris Murray, Nick Smith Jr. out of Arkansas. They said Miami needs guard depth. They could go with him. Colby Jones, do-it-all guard at Xavier. Ryan Rupert from France. Gigi Jackson out of South Carolina, forward. City Sissoko still available. Derek White out of Duke, and Brandon Pozinski out of Santa Clara. So, again, really solid players are still on the board. A lot of these guys were not expected to be drafted higher than this, so it's not shocking they're still available. Cam Whitmore is the only one where it's like he could have been drafted already. You kind of feel like he could have been already drafted, but it is what it is. He still could be. Now we've got 10 votes in the poll. Thank you guys for voting. Will Trayce Jackson-Davis be selected in the first round? 60% say yes, 40% say no. So we're getting closer to 50-50. For a time, the poll definitely had Trayce Jackson-Davis being selected in the first round, but more of the no's are starting to enter, and I can see that. You can definitely tell that these teams are drafting younger guys. They're drafting the potential guys more so than anything else. And notable Heat undrafted players, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson. It's still crazy that many guys had a massive role for the Heat that were undrafted. Just shows you can have success in the league even if you're not drafted. Just because you're not does not mean your career is over. You're not going to get any shot in the league. You still have a chance, even if you aren't drafted. The Miami Heat, with the 18th pick, what are they going to take? They take Jaime Jaquez. So Jaime Jaquez got picked over Cam Whitmore, the first older guy to be taken as well. That's a very important thing as well. Jaime Jaquez spent several years at UCLA, and he is a guy that has a lot of skills for sure, but his smartness is what really strikes out when it comes to, him playing basketball. His basketball IQ is high. He knows how to play basketball at a high level. He's a great player all around. He can shoot the ball, but he's also one of those guys, he just knows what to do on the floor at the right time. He knows when it's his turn to shoot. He knows when it's time to pass. First Pac-12 player of the year at UCLA since Kevin Love in 08 as well. That's crazy. UCLA, the brand school that they are, you would not think that would have been the case, but it was right there. That long where you have not had a Pac-12 player of the year from UCLA. But Jaime Jaquez broke that streak. And Jaime Jaquez, I think, can have a lot of success with the Heat. If they give him a chance to play, he's got a lot of versatility on defense and offense. Last season, he averaged 18 points and 8 boards, and he shot 48% from the field. Those are solid stats. And he can pass. He's gotten better at shooting, and again, his defense is pretty solid as well. RC says the Cam Whitmore situation not drafted is so weird. Only top sport, you think it's medical issues? I mean, they could be. I mean, I think I've heard a little bit about that or something like that, but it's just he's very talented. I mean, unless there's legitimately concern there, I'm shocked he hasn't been drafted either. I mean, I didn't think Jaime Jaquez was going to get drafted over Cam Whitmore. I figured Cam Whitmore would probably have been taken, probably like at least top 12. I thought more likely top 10, but it's crazy. We'll have to see, once he does get drafted, what potentially is what led him to get, last this long on the board. RC says, well, Jaime Jaquez got a face for Miami Beach. That's funny. I mean, hey, I think he could have a lot of success for Miami. I mean, he's a really good player. I know he's an older guy, but just because you're an older guy does not mean you can't have success. Older guys can't have success. He's got a lot of versatility that I think that the Heat can use. So it's going to be really interesting for sure. If any of you guys would like to talk, got the StreamYard link right here. Whether if you are still here, Edward, if you'd like to talk about potentially the Celtics 25th pick, or RC, if you'd like to talk as well. Got the StreamYard link. Really appreciate you guys for being here. But we're at the 19th pick in the draft. The Golden State Warriors are up next. They need a stretch power forward, and they need bench versatility. So if you're going off, stretch forward, I mean, Cam Whitmore or Chris Murray could be that guy. But like you said, RC, with Cam Whitmore, it could be a medical situation. Who knows? I mean, that's really interesting for sure. I mean, it's very odd that he is still on the board. I mean, he's a talented player, but he just hasn't been taken yet. I mean, Jaime Jaquez, like I said, he's a really good player, but him being drafted over Cam Whitmore is very shocking. That is not something that was expected. Jalen Hood-Schifino maybe lasted a little bit longer than people thought going to the Lakers at 17, but he's finally off the board. But Cam Whitmore is still available. With the Warriors, they said they need a stretch forward. So, I mean, again, they could go with a Chris Murray or they could go with a Cam Whitmore, but you just never know. It's hard to tell what these teams are thinking sometimes. I mean, sometimes when you're looking at it, you think that it's because a team needs a certain type of player that they're going to go, like a stretch power forward or like a point guard, and you think, well, hey, they're going to take this guy, they're going to take this guy, and then they go a completely different route and take a player that's not even the position that they need. It's just sometimes, teams just go with what they want with a player instead of maybe what they need. Warriors receive Chris Paul, Wizards receive Jordan Poole and Ron Rollins, 2031 round pick, 2027 second round pick. Yeah, that's insane. I'm surprised the Warriors gave up Jordan Poole. Go Tigers. Edwards says, where did Cam play? I forgot. He played at Villanova. Cam Whitmore played at Villanova. It's easy to forget because Villanova didn't make the tournament last year, and because they had injuries to Justin Moore. And actually, Cam Whitmore missed the first 7 games with an injury, but he was really good when he played at Villanova. And obviously, Justin Moore was out. But yeah, Villanova had some injury issues going on. If they were healthy all year, I do think that Villanova probably would have made the tournament. They probably would have made the tournament for sure. But it's crazy. It's crazy that Whitmore's still on the board. Once he's off the board, though, then things are going to kind of like cool off after that, where you're going to get to like more of the players where, you kind of expect them to still be available. I don't think Bryce Sensabaugh, most people were really expecting him to go higher than this. Maybe this is kind of around the area now where people probably think he would be picked. But it's kind of one of those deals where you're getting more to players that it's not too shocking that they're still available. But the Golden State Warriors do not select Cam Whitmore, so he's still available. They select Brandon Podzinski out of Santa Clara. So this is the second year in a row there's been a player out of Santa Clara. You had Jalen Williams last year out of Santa Clara. Now you've got Brandon Podzinski. And Brandon Podzinski, he played at Illinois. He transferred down to Santa Clara, had a lot of success this past season. And now he gets to be drafted in the top 20. Definitely a big shocker there. He's a guy that rose in the draft late, kind of like Bilal Colby did, but I don't really think anybody was thinking Brandon Podzinski would get drafted this high either. So that's big for him. The Warriors, they took a guy that has a lot of game. He's a tall player. He can shoot. So I think that's big there. But Cam Whitmore still being available is insane. Go Tigers says Wizards got so many picks till 2030 off the Paul and Bill trade. Yeah, what they got is crazy. I can't believe how many picks the Suns had to give up to. The Suns, I mean, it's insane. I mean, they got a lot of picks. I mean, the Wizards are going to need them, though. Like, the Wizards are down a lot of players right now. They're going to need all those picks. Brandon Podzinski last season at Santa Clara averaged 20 points, 9 boards, and 4 assists on 44% three-point shooting. So he's good in a lot of areas. And they have on their versatility. He's a 6'5", 204-pound guard. And again, he can do it all. He can rebound at a high level for a guard. Yes, he was at the West Coast Conference level. So will he be able to rebound as well in the NBA? Who knows? But he shows that nose for the ball. There's a lot of guards that do that. Kind of like Christian Brown this past season for Denver. I don't know if Brandon Podzinski will have the same impact as Christian Brown, but they're similar in the fact that they're great at rebounding. Podzinski can pass, and he lit it up at Santa Clara. It was a good move by him to transfer out there because at Illinois he wasn't getting any playing time. But he's a really solid player, and he can have a shot in the league with Golden State. It's always a good team to get drafted to, usually. They usually do a good job in development out there. Houston has the 20th pick, and they need a starting point guard, and they need player development. Well, they're not going to really get a starting point guard that's one of the best players available on the board, so I don't think they're going to get a point guard here. I mean, unless they go with like a wild card like Marcus Sasser or something, but I don't think they're going to go with him when he's still way down the board. But they probably go with like a forward or something, but maybe finally it will be Cam Whitmore's turn. I mean, maybe. Hopefully Verani finally gets picked. I mean, it's always tough when you're in the green room and you don't get picked. I remember the one year that you had Bol Bol. Bol Bol was still in the green room for the longest time, and he got picked like 44th because he was projected to be in the first round. They brought him in the green room with the other guys because they usually do like the top 20 players, and most of them have been taken. Cam Whitmore still left. Are there any? I think maybe Nick Smith. Nick Smith's still in the green room as well. I think Nick Smith is. Chris Murray might be as well, and maybe Bryce Sensabaugh. But most of the players that are in the green room are out now. Some the other guys are going to be players that aren't there. They get to walk up on stage, but Bol was there for a long time. I don't think Cam Whitmore is going to last that long. I think he will eventually be taken, but still, it's going to be interesting. I've got the StreamYard link in chat. If you guys would like to talk about the draft, feel free if you guys would like to talk. StreamYard link is right there. But definitely, it has been a very interesting draft. A lot of players have been projected where we thought they were going to go, and then they've gone to those teams. And other teams have picked players that were completely out of left field. We're not expecting those guys, to get picked where they did. Some of them have been out of left field, but some of these teams, they like to do what you're not expecting them to do. It almost adds to the intrigue. If it was predictable, then it wouldn't be as fun, right? It makes it so much fun with the draft when you don't know where these players are going to go. It's one of those things, I think. Like the unpredictability of the draft makes it so fun. Go Tigers said Brad Stevens fleeced them for Porzingis. Yeah, I mean, Porzingis, they did a good job with the trade. I think the trade's great in a way. I mean, they won the trade on paper. But losing Marcus Smart hurts because, like you said earlier, Edward, Marcus Smart is the heart and soul of the team. But getting Kristaps for what they had to give up was they won the trade. They did a great job in the trade. And as long as Porzingis stays healthy, because that's been one of his biggest issues. With tall players like that, health is always going to be an issue for the most part. But if Porzingis does stay relatively healthy with Boston, and he's able to play when it matters, which is the playoffs, as long as he's available in the playoffs, I think that it's a good trade. I think they did a great job with the trade. But still, losing Marcus Smart, though, I mean, if they had lost Brogdon, that would have been better. It's not that Brogdon isn't a great player either. It's just the fact that Marcus Smart's been a part of Boston for a decade. And like you said, heart and soul of the team. And I mean, his defense makes the other players on the team better. Because when you see a guy doing so well on the defensive end, it makes everybody else want to play better on defense too. It's one of those things. It's one of those effects with your team. It spreads to the rest of the guys with how you're doing. It's like if a guy makes a three, it almost makes it easier for the next guy to hit that three sometimes. Like you'll see some teams when they get in the rhythm, like Klay Thompson hits a couple threes, and then you see Steph Curry hitting a couple threes, and then Jordan Poole, when he was with the Warriors, now he's not. He hit a three. It's just one of those things where multiple guys start getting going at the same time. And I just feel like now that you don't have Marcus Smart, it's going to be tough for the Celtics to still have that elite defensive identity at times. They're not an elite defensive team consistently, but Marcus Smart allowed them to have success on defense because he basically would start the great defense. And it spread to the rest of the team. Jeff said, I think it was very, not Smart getting rid of Smart. He got the rest of them engaged. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how the Celtics play now that Smart's gone. Are they still going to be, as intense on defense, or will they be relying so much more on offense? It's going to be interesting. Ab Silver's back up on stage for the Houston Rockets, and they select Cam Whitmore. He's off the board. Cam Whitmore finally gets drafted. He got picked 20th overall to Houston. I think that's a great pick by the Rockets. Unless there's medical conditions or something like that going on with Cam Whitmore, I think it's a great move for them, for the Rockets, to draft him because he's a really talented player. If there's some underlying tones under there that of why he got drafted a lot lower, so be it. I think picking him is a great move because he was a guy that people were thinking was going to be taken top 10, and he's still available at 20. So that's a great pick by the Rockets and great for Cam Whitmore to finally get picked. It's very tough when you don't get picked, and you're still available. It's very tough for sure. But finally, for him, his dream has come true. He is in the NBA. Last season, averaged 13 points, 5 boards, 48% from the field. Really talented player. I mean, he's a very talented player. The only thing, like I said, that hurts him is the passing. Because he's great off the dribble, and he's also a really solid shooter. I mean, he's an elite shooter, no, but he can. He can shoot, and he's also a great driver downhill. So he's got dribbling ability. It's just more about the passing. If he can become a better passer, then I think that he could have success in the NBA. But we'll have to see. I think it helps as well that he's going to the Rockets, a team that really just needs any player that they can get, and he'll get playing time more than likely. Even if he's not starting. Like if he's behind Jabari Smith, but he could start. You never know. He could start, but it's going to be very interesting for sure. Again, we got the StreamYard link in chat if you guys would like to talk about the draft. I really do appreciate you guys for being here. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Share the stream out on social media. But most importantly, I really do appreciate you guys for being here. It's been a great draft. A lot of players getting picked that were kind of predictable, but some were really shocking as well. You can't have a draft without that. There's always going to be players that you're shocked about where they end up. So it's really interesting. But you've got the Brooklyn Nets are on the board up next. They have not been on the board yet. This is their first pick. And last season, they were 45-37. And they were a really solid team, but then obviously they lost Kevin Durant. They lost Kyrie Irving. And, you know, they trailed downward. They started to lose more toward the end of the season. And they had no chance against the 76ers. They got swept in the playoffs. Bridges tried, Mikal Bridges, who they ended up getting in the trades. You know, Spencer Dinwiddie, Cam Johnson. Those guys tried their best. But they just didn't have any star talent anymore. Bridges, I think, is going to become a star, but it's going to take time. And, you know, right now they just need to find probably like the best player that's available. It's going to be interesting. RC, so I'm definitely tuning into some Houston Rockets Summer League games. Cam and Amin, for sure. Both players are going to be really fun to watch. Cam Whitmore and Amin Thompson in the Summer League. And usually, like someone like Amin Thompson, he'll probably only play like the first game. Usually the top players, they'll play like the first game or like a little bit of it. But then like the lower picks, they'll play the whole time because they're doing anything that they can to showcase their talent. So that's interesting for sure. But to your point, it's going to be fun to watch the Summer League in general. But the Rockets definitely will be fun to watch. But the Nets, they have back-to-back picks as well. They don't just have the 21st pick. They have the 22nd pick as well. So they can get 2 impact players here. RC says only top sport. Trace Jackson Davis will probably go in the second round. Yeah, that's a good point, RC. I agree with you. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, he's got the talent and ability, and he surely put up the points to be a first-round pick. But he doesn't have the three-point shooting ability yet. He hasn't shown it in a game. He's shown it in some workouts, but he hasn't shown it in a game. And he is 23 years old, and a lot of times, especially in the first round these days, outside of Jaime Jaquez, who's been picked, all these players are either sophomores or freshmen. So it is extremely tough for seniors to get picked, especially guys that don't shoot. So even though Trace Jackson Davis is a very unique player because of the fact that he's so talented, but he doesn't really display the shooting ability and everything, it's just tough. But I mean, I think he is a first round talent. But to your point, RC, he probably will be a second round pick. I'd have to agree with you on that one. But they're showing Dan Hurley. Dan Hurley's up there. He's talking on stage, and they're showing the clip when he was hugging Jordan Hawkins. That was a really cool scene there. But they've got on the board, the best player available, according to Jay Billis, is Bryce Sensabaugh. That'd be interesting if Brooklyn took him. I mean, he's talented. Bryce Sensabaugh is. But if you talk about like Jet Howard not being the best defender. Bryce Sensabaugh really struggles in the defensive end, and he didn't pass a lot either. He's a guard. Someone like Cam Whitmore, he's a forward, so maybe you can get away with not being a great passer. But Sensabaugh, I don't know if it's the fact he can't pass. It's just like Ohio State wasn't the best team last year either. So he was trying to do everything he possibly could to score on his own. So it's one of those things where sometimes, you trying to do too much causes you to, even though you're putting up a lot of points, just struggle. I think you struggle a little bit more because of the fact that you're scoring like 17, 18 points per game. Sensabaugh scored a lot, but your efficiency is not very good. And your efficiency is not very good because of the fact that you're having to shoot more. Same with Keontae George at Baylor. I think it's the same thing. His efficiency was low as well, and he dropped a bit as well. I think he got drafted fairly respectably, but someone like Bryce Sensabaugh is still available because he didn't really get to display an all-around game. Chris Murray's still available. He's another older guy. If he was a freshman, he definitely would be a higher pick. But I think that he shows not as much versatility as like Keegan Murray does. Keegan Murray's better off the dribble. Keegan Murray's a little bit better of a defender than Chris Murray. I think Chris Murray can develop into that. I think he can definitely eventually become a great defender. I think he can eventually, showcase, certain skills all around that will help him stick in the league. But I think that's why he's still available. Plus, he's a year older than his brother. The Brooklyn Nets take Noah Clowney, power forward out of Alabama, says Adam Silver. That's interesting. Noah Clowney's a guy that some people thought would be a first-round pick. Some people thought that he would be, a lot lower of a pick. But that's crazy. Noah Clowney went higher than most people thought that he would. And I don't blame. I do not blame whatsoever the Nets for taking Noah Clowney. He's a talented player. I mean, he has a lot of talent. He definitely got overshadowed by Brandon Miller. But Noah Clowney had a lot of great moments at Alabama as well. He definitely showcased a lot of skill. He was the number one high school player in South Carolina in the 2022 class. He goes to Alabama. But still, I think that Noah Clowney is a guy that could have a lot of success with the Nets if he's given a chance for sure. Go Tigers says, I'm going to get back to watching more game film for this football recruit. Keep up the great work. Really appreciate that, Edward. Thanks for stopping by. Hope to see you again soon. Really appreciate it. Hope you have fun watching film. I'm assuming it's a Clemson player. Definitely Clemson's getting a lot of great players for sure, but I do really appreciate you for stopping by, Edward. I really appreciate it. It's been a great draft so far, and I'm sure it will be really fun down the stretch as well. Really do appreciate you for watching. But now you've got the Nets again. After they've selected a 6'10", 205-pound forward in Noah Clowney, again, a really talented forward that displays a lot of defensive versatility. Last season, he only averaged 10 points and 8 boards with 49% shooting from the field, but he's got so much skill set. I think that the Nets see him as a guy that can really improve down the stretch. Go Tire said it's a 2025 kid that I'm interviewing tomorrow. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's really cool. Definitely have to check that out for sure. It's really cool you're doing an interview with him. I'm sure that will go well. Definitely. That's awesome. But again, really do appreciate you for being here. The draft's been really fun. We still got around 35, picks left, but definitely, to your point, we're definitely always got to look for the future. The 2024 players, the 2025 players, they'll be coming around the corner as well. It's really cool that you're interviewing him for sure. That's really, really cool. RC says, is it just me? I only talk sports. There's Noah Clowney remind you of Chris Bosh. He has the Bosh build. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think you look at, Chris Bosh and how impactful he was in the NBA, even when he wasn't with the Heat, when he was with the Raptors, early on in his career, he was so raw, but he was just so talented. I think Noah Clowney's kind of like that. I mean, I see, shades of it for sure, to your point. But Noah Clowney has a lot of areas to improve. But I think just based off sheer athleticism, that's why he got picked. 21st. Because other than that, I mean, again, there was a lot of people that even had him as a second-round pick. There was definitely some people that thought that he would be a second-round pick because, he struggled at some areas. But still, Noah Clowney is again, very, very talented. And I think that he definitely has a shot, to be a great NBA player. But as with every other player, just because you get drafted is not the end of it. You got to do everything you possibly can to stick in the league. It is definitely tough to stick in the league with so many great players. I mean, there are players in Europe that can play in the NBA, but they're just not in the NBA. They're in Europe, and they're playing great basketball over there, sometimes China, sometimes in other countries. They're doing a great job. It's just unfortunately for them, they just didn't, either get a chance to be in the league or they did get a chance and they just didn't stick because there's just so many great players. Again, got another call for the StreamYard. If any of you guys would like to talk about the draft, feel free for sure to do so. If you guys would like to talk, the StreamYard link is right there. But again, really do appreciate all you guys for being here. It's been a great draft. Still a lot of picks to go. We're 2.5 hours in, and we're still in the first round. So the draft is going to be a long time for sure. We'll have to see. We'll try to stay on for as long as possible. We'll have to see about trying to stay to the end. But if it goes too long, we'll probably have to end the stream sometime in the beginning of the second round or so. But again, do really appreciate you guys for being here. But if any of you guys would like to talk, the StreamYard link is right there. But they're showing Mikal Bridges for the Nets. Again, Bridges could develop into a star. I mean, he got so much better, at the Nets where he got to really showcase his ability. With the Suns, he was surrounded by Booker, Ayton, and Paul, where he really couldn't showcase how good of a player he was. With the Nets and the fact that they don't have as good of a team, on paper, some of these other teams now, they've traded away their best players. Bridges really got to shine. Bridges showed what he couldn't show with the Suns. And that was a guy that can basically score on his own. And that's what makes a star. A star is a player that can score without any help. You don't need to piggyback off of better players. You don't have to, be surrounded by really good talent to have success. You can score at will on your own. And when you can do that, that shows you how great of a player that you are. So it's interesting for sure. But the Nets, their next pick is in the 22nd pick in the draft. And we're going to have to see who they decide to pick. They just picked a power forward in Noah Clowney. Will they go with a guard this time? Jay Billis is best available. He's got Bryce Sensabaugh, Chris Murray, Nick Smith, Colby Jones, and Rand Rupert. Maybe they'll go with Nick Smith. They could go with another SEC guy. And Nick Smith is a really talented player. Just unfortunately for Nick Smith, he was injured, and he never really got to showcase his full ability at Arkansas. Kind of like Derek Whitehead at Duke. It's wild that if you don't play, kind of like Darius Garland at Vanderbilt. Darius Garland got hurt at Vanderbilt, and then he ended up shutting it down. He got drafted in the top 5. But then players like Nick Smith and Derek Whitehead that decide to play, they move down the board. So it's almost like if you get hurt and you're like a potential one and done, it's best not to try to play because then you struggle and then people don't think you're as good of a player as you were before. So it's interesting. It's definitely a phenomenon for sure. And right on cue, Derek Whitehead is taken. The Nets, they take Derek Whitehead despite his injuries, despite the fact that when he was at Duke, he was never 100%. He had a lot of injuries going on, and he still has injury issues. Right now, his foot is banged up, and we're not even going to be 100% sure if he's going to be able to play right off the bat. But still, I think that overall, Derek Whitehead, if he can just get healthy and regain his high school form, then he should be good to go. And he got a lot better at shooting when he was at Duke as well. So that's a big key. You talk about Derek Whitehead. When he was in high school, he wasn't even as good of a three-point player, a three-point shooter as he was. He got a lot better at three-point shooting at Duke because he wasn't able to drive as much anymore because of his injury. So it's almost like, in a way, even though the injury hurt his draft stock, it might have helped him as a player in the NBA just because of the fact that he'll be able to shoot the ball at a high level because he was forced to do so at Duke because he couldn't go off the dribble. I think if he can get his off-the-dribble game back in the league like he had in high school once he gets healthy, and he continues to shoot the ball at a high level like he did at Duke, I think Derek White could have success. He only fell because he was hurt. If he had to shut it down and not played for Duke, he probably would have been a top 15, top 10 pick. So it's interesting. It definitely, spurs the question, should you play if you're hurt? Even a guy like Romeo Langford a few years back, he was injured. Had an injured finger, and his draft stock fell. He fell to 14. Would have been drafted top 8 or so if he didn't play. Darius Garland's the big example. Darius Garland did not play for Vanderbilt, and he got drafted top 5. If he had played, he probably would have fallen in the draft. So it's just really interesting looking at Nick Smith and Derek White, the two guys that played through injury, and they struggled, how they fell down the draft board. So on our poll here, you've got 55% say yes, 45% say no on will Trayce Jackson-Davis be selected in the first round. It's looking more and more likely that he won't be drafted in the first round, to your guys' point. More and more of you are picking that Trayce Jackson-Davis will be in the second round. And that's very well possible. You guys could be right for sure. I think that it is increasingly likely that he won't be a first-round pick. I think he is capable of being a first-round pick for sure, but with just so many younger guys that are so talented, I definitely understand why, that he, possibly could fall out of the first round. But he is such a talented player that, I think that he should get a look. But it's really interesting. But again, really appreciate you guys for participating in the vote right there. Really interesting. We're on the 23rd pick in the draft. You've got the Portland Trailblazers. And they got, in the third pick of the draft, Scoot Henderson. Who will they take with the 23rd pick to try to help Damian Lillard? It's going to be really interesting because they could go with, a small forward and say that we want like a Chris Murray. Or, they could say that they want a center and they could take a Trayce Jackson-Davis because they kind of do need a center. They need maybe a backup center, but we'll have to see what they prioritize here. They also have the 43rd pick in the second round as well. But they need starting front court and they need a defensive identity. So defensive identity, you can't take Bryce Sensabaugh if you need defense. Maybe Colby Jones. They could take maybe Colby Jones as like a wing. RC says, well, only talk sports. Who's had the best draft so far to you? What team? That's a great question. I know the easy cop-out answer is to say the Spurs because they potentially have the generational talent, with Victor Wembanyama. That would be potentially, you could just say, your easy answer. But, that's a really good question. You probably have to go with a team that's had multiple picks. You can maybe say the Rockets, potentially with Whitmore and Thompson, if they really develop. That's a good question, though. The Trailblazers take Chris Murray. So they did pick one of the players that I mentioned. Chris Murray is who the Trailblazers take. He's a 6'9", 213-pound forward out of Iowa. Brother of Keegan Murray, who's in the NBA with the Sacramento Kings, had a really solid rookie year. I think Chris Murray has the potential to be just as good as his brother. I don't think people are really expecting him to be because he does, arguably have a couple of weaker skill sets than his brother has. Keegan Murray, you can say he's maybe just a bit better, but Chris Murray's still a great shooter as well, and he does display some defensive capabilities. So I think he definitely can make it in the NBA. It will be interesting, though, while watching him in the league, how he does compare to his brother and how well he, can play. He's a very versatile player. They got versatility when talking about him. He's a really talented player. He's an older guy. He's a year older than his brother when coming out of college. They're the same age because they're twins. But he's a year older, when coming out of college because of the fact you look at Keegan Murray went last year. Chris Murray left this year, so he's a junior when Keegan was a sophomore. But I do think that Chris Murray can have success as well. Very talented player. And you look at his stats. He averaged less than a point a game as a freshman. He averaged 9 points per game as a sophomore. He averaged 20 points per game as a junior at Iowa. His brother averaged like 22 points. So, Chris Murray's not that far off at all. In Sacramento, they've got the 24th pick in the draft, and they say they need a starting power forward. That's interesting. Who would be a starting power forward that they could take? Gigi Jackson. They can maybe take Gigi Jackson or Leonard Miller or even Maxwell Lewis from Pepperdine. They could take any of those three guys. That's really interesting with Sacramento. First playoff appearance is 2006. They lost in the first round, but they had a great series with the Warriors. That was a fantastic series. Went to 7 games, and they almost won. They were so close. But unfortunately for them, they just fell short. But that's really interesting right there with Chris Murray. I think Chris Murray can have success. But yeah, RC, you can make an argument that the Trailblazers with Scoot Henderson and Chris Murray, or you could even say the Rockets with Cam Whitmore and Amen Thompson. Both teams did a really solid job in the draft, I think, there. But, it's tough that when you only have, one pick, like a team like the Raptors only getting Grady Dick to say they have the best draft so far. You got to go with a team probably with 2 picks. The Kings need a starting power forward, though, and a shot blocker. That really narrows down their choices. Because, if you want a shot blocker, probably some of your best picks available for that would be Trace Jackson Davis. He's a really good shot blocker. Maybe Leonard Miller or something like that. But if you're going with the starting power forward, who knows? Maybe you could go with Maxwell Lewis or something. There's a lot of interesting picks. You're starting to get to the interesting part of the draft where there's still some really talented players left, but they're guys that are less of a sure thing. They're more unproven guys than the guys ahead of them. Where like the guys ahead of them, you can really say that, they're really talented or, they don't have that many weaknesses. But the further that you get in the draft, I do think that, you start getting to more of the guys that have more weaknesses. Like Gigi Jackson, for example. He's the youngest guy in this draft. He's only 18 years old. And he displayed so much talent at South Carolina last year, but he also displayed so many weaknesses. Turnover prone, took bad shots. There was a lot of holes in his game. And that's why he's still available, because there was a time when he was projected like top 15, but he fell because of how raw he is. And a lot of teams are weary to take a player that's that raw. Sacramento, the pick is in. Which player are they going to take? And they actually go with a power forward that wasn't even on Jay Bills' top 10 available. They take Olivier Max's Prosper out of Marquette to the Sacramento Kings. The Marquette Golden Eagles. Olivier Max's Prosper was a guy that really improved as the season went along for Marquette. Really wasn't talked about that much at the beginning of the year, but he improved tremendously, and the Sacramento Kings take him. He's from Canada. He's a Canadian. It's really interesting there. He definitely improved for the Golden Eagles. Definitely a guy that showcased a lot of talent, but he's raw as well. He's kind of like Gigi Jackson that he's raw, but I do think that he showcased, less weaknesses. Said he's fluent in 4 languages as well. It's really cool. French, English, Spanish, and Haitian. But that's an interesting pick. Thought maybe they would go with Gigi Jackson. Didn't know if they would take Olivier Max's Prosper, a guy that was projected by most people as a second-round pick. But he did climb. And sometimes those guys that climb late in the draft process, they get taken higher than even the draft experts believe. Kind of like Belil Colably and Olivier Max's Prosper, both those guys were taken higher than people were expecting. Last season, he averaged 13 points and 5 boards, and he shot 51% of the field. He's got a lot of versatility. He's got great size as well. So I think that, again, the potential is there like the rest of these guys for him to have success. Now, it's not guaranteed. He's 6'8", 212, and again, there's a lot of parts of his game, it's really raw. It's not guaranteed he'll have success, but he is a very talented player. He's a good defender, something that will help him out, something that more and more NBA teams are kind of prioritizing. It seemed like for a while that the NBA was kind of getting away from defense, but now it seems like more and more guys or more and more teams are prioritizing guys with defense again. Which I think is smart. I think it's really smart to prioritize defense because defense helps you win. It's great to be good at offense, but defense helps you win as well. You've got to have good defense to be able to win as a team. It's very hard to win with just offense. So guys like Olivier, Maxence Prosper, I think, have a shot, to have success in the NBA for sure because of the fact that their defensive versatility is going to help shore up other weaknesses in their game. And like if the shooting's not really there right now, or maybe the passing's not there on the offensive end, you can get away with it because you're defending well and you're good scoring down low, and you can even occasionally step out and shoot the three. I think that the Kings got a good player. I think he can really develop, behind, Keegan Murray. He can develop behind Keegan Murray and develop behind Sabonis. I think he has a shot to really be able to compete for a roster spot there. It's going to be interesting to see how he does, though. I think he could have a lot of success. But now we're on to the Grizzlies. You got the Memphis Grizzlies, the team that a lot of people are talking about for not positive reasons. You had the Dylan Brooks situation, and then John Moran, is he going to be able to play and all that kind of stuff. Really interesting there with the Grizzlies. They just got Marcus Smart from the Celtics in the trade there. So now, this is the Grizzlies trade, but the Celtics are going to be the one that ends up with the pick, I think, at the end of the day, especially if the trade does go through. But Memphis, they need a small forward and three-point shooting, but if the Celtics do get the pick, it'll be interesting what the Celtics do with it, especially because Boston is a team that is a contender. Do they take a guard to replace somewhat, a little bit of Marcus Smart's production? Do you take like a Nick Smith? Somebody like that? I don't know if that's the right move or not, but it's going to be really interesting. Memphis last year finished 51-31, had such a good season, but they disappointed mightily in the playoffs, losing to the Lakers in very disappointing fashion. That last game by Memphis where they lost by like 30 points, that was just a terrible loss. Everybody just didn't even you never want to say a team's not trying, but the lack of effort was astounding. Just did not see it. Memphis has a lot of questions they need to answer about their franchise. They got a lot of questions. So it's going to be really interesting for sure to see what Memphis drafts here, and if Boston does get the pick, what they're going to do with it. But I think that whoever's picked here has the chance to be a solid player because there's still good players left. Guys like Bryce Sensabaugh, Nick Smith, those guys are solid. They're solid guys. Nick Smith, if he wasn't injured, would have been drafted higher. If Bryce Sensabaugh had more defense, he'd have been drafted higher. Colby Jones is solid. G.G. Jackson's really solid. He's just a guy that is very raw and young. Maxwell Lewis at Pepperdine was really solid at the West Coast Conference level. Andre Jackson, he was a winner at UConn. There's still some solid players available. There's going to be good players in the second round as well. Always diamond in the rough players that are still available. You even got guys as well like Julian Phillips out of Tennessee, Marcus Sasser out of Houston, Jalen Wilson out of Kansas, Keontae Johnson, K-State. You're getting further and further down the list, but there's still good players that have a shot to stick in the league, if they're given a chance. And that's the key. Even if it's just playing in the G League, as long as you get a chance, that's all that matters for these players, especially the ones that are taken in the second round. They just need a chance. They might have flaws in their game, but the thing is, there's just so many great players, and sometimes players don't really get a chance. But if a player gets an opportunity to play and he takes advantage of it, the odds are he's going to have a good chance to stick in the league. But if he doesn't get an opportunity, or if he does get an opportunity, he squanders it, and he just doesn't perform, then it's hard to get another shot. You have to showcase your ability with the little bit of time that you get, especially when you are a second-round pick. When you're a first-round pick, you get more chances usually, but a second-round pick, it's one of those things where, you got to take advantage of the little bit of time that you get. They're showing the Celtics Heat game again where Derek White scored on that tap bat. That was crazy. And then Boston ended up losing in Game 7. Jason Tatum got hurt. That really blew the Celtics' chances. That was unfortunate. But Miami won. They took advantage of that. But that was crazy, though. Derek White scoring on that shot. That was one of the craziest endings to an NBA game ever. I know that might be hyperbole because there are so many great moments in NBA history, so many great games. But that was a fantastic ending that game. What a play by White. And the Grizzlies select Marcus Sasser out of Houston. That's crazy. Point guard, 6'2" guard. He's a little bit undersized, but he is a veteran. He's a guy that's older. Another older guy taken, just like Jaime Jaquez. Kelvin Sampson, you can tell how happy he is. But that's a big, big move by the Grizzlies, showing you that they want a guy that maybe can play right now with Ja out for 25 games. Maybe Marcus Sasser can come in and be able to play some minutes early on in the season, be able to develop, and then maybe he can stick around the rotation once Morant's back. Marcus Sasser, first consensus first-team All-American at Houston since 1984. That's almost 40 years. That's crazy. He had a great season last year. And the thing is, he had a great season before that, but he got hurt. I think that if Marcus Sasser hadn't got injured 2 years ago, he probably would have already been in the draft already. He averaged 17 points, 3 assists, 2 steals, 44% of the field. He also shoots the three ball very well, and he's a great defender. So he's definitely all around. He's good in a lot of areas, and even though, again, you could say he's a bit undersized maybe, I think he makes up for it in other areas. The Indiana Pacers are back on the board. The Indiana Pacers are a team that I think they might have made a trade with the Wizards. They drafted Blue Colibly, but now people think that they're getting Jarris Walker and that the Wizards are getting Blue Colibly. So that's a very interesting situation there. But the Pacers, they were 35-47, and they were 11th in the East. So it's not like, the Pacers were that bad. They're very close to being a playoff team. They're very close. And they need front court depth and three-point shooting. So if they need three-point shooting, they could maybe go with like a Bryce Sensabaugh or a Colby Jones. Those guys can shoot the three. But if they need front court depth, they could go with Gigi Jackson out of South Carolina. They could go with Leonard Miller, Maxwell Lewis, even Trace Jackson Davis. They could take him with the 32nd pick as well because they have that also. But it's going to be interesting to see what the Pacers do. But they're a team that's very close. Like, they're on the fringe. The Indiana Pacers are on the fringe of being, a playoff team. They're so close. They have been a team that's just so close to being a playoff team for the last few years. They just cannot break through for whatever reason. They just can't get all the way there, whether it's just because they just don't have enough depth all around. There's just some pieces that they need. But I think that if they keep drafting quality players, I think that eventually that they will get there. It's going to be interesting, though. I think that overall, looking at the Indiana Pacers, they just need to keep drafting solid players. They just need to do everything that they possibly can to keep building players around Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, Miles Turner, get a couple more solid players. Someone like a Jarris Walker, if he, develops, if that's who they end up getting, and then someone like Isaiah Jackson off the bench. Some of those guys just get a little bit better. I think that the potential is there. It's going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Indiana Pacers develop, if they can finally break through and be a playoff team for the first time in years. They have not been in the playoffs for a while. They've been in a big drought, but they can get back to the playoffs. Any team can get there. You just got to make the right moves with your roster and try to find the right fits all around. So it's interesting. They're talking to Adrian Wojnarowski, the senior ESPN advisor, and they're talking about that three-team trade. The Celtics receiving Kristaps Porzingis in 2023 and 2024 first-round picks. They got the 25th pick just now. And the Grizzlies received Marcus Smart. The Wizards received Tyus Jones, Neil Gallinari, and Mike Muscala in 2023 second-round pick from Boston. So interesting right there. So that means if that trade is officially finalized, that means that the 25th pick of Marcus Sasser goes to the Celtics. So that's interesting because that Marcus Sasser is a guy that you could maybe make an argument can help replace a little bit of Smart's production. So that actually makes more sense, I think. Marcus Smart being gone, I mean, he was basically their point guard. So now, looking at the Celtics, they're going to have Marcus Sasser, they're going to have Peyton Pritchard, they're still going to have Malcolm Brogdon. Unless he's gone as well, you never know anymore. That these rosters are all over the place. The NBA has been fun to keep up with. It's been hectic. I mean, players are moving all over the place, and like all these rumors, you see stuff on the internet that, these players are going here, and then, things have changed. Now this player's going here. It's so much stuff going on. It's unbelievable. Again, got the StreamYard link here if you guys would like to talk about the draft. We're almost at the 3-hour mark, and the Indiana Pacers do select Ben Shepherd out of Belmont, small forward. He's a guy that really rose up in the draft, the mock drafts the last few weeks. Small forward out of Belmont. He is a guy that has talent. He's 6'6", 195 from a smaller school. Just because you play at a smaller school does not mean you can't have success. And a lot of people were really buying into Ben Shepherd's, the Ben Shepherd hype as the draft season went along. We got closer to the draft. He definitely gained steam, and the Pacers took him with the 26th pick. So they're obviously really confident that he can have a lot of success. He's a really solid player. His film looks really good. If you guys would like to talk about the draft, here's the StreamYard link. Probably will be ending the stream really soon. We're 3 hours in, and we're not done with the first round just yet. The draft definitely takes a while between picks, but it's been a very fun draft. Really interesting. See all these players get new homes, going to new teams. And I think some of the fits are better than others, but a lot of these teams have, they've picked good players for what they need. I think a lot of these teams have done a pretty solid job in that regard. I don't really think that there's necessarily been any picks that you could say that pick just doesn't make any sense at all. Most of these picks have been relatively solid. You can say there's a few that's like, kind of interesting they didn't take this player instead. Maybe they need this player more. But I don't really think any of these picks have necessarily been bad. It was very interesting to see Cam Whitmore last as long as he did. That was shocking, but he finally got taken as well. It just took a little bit of time, but it finally happened. But some of the top players still available in the draft. You've got Nick Smith, Bryce Sensabaugh, Colby Jones, Maxwell Lewis, Andre Jackson, Gigi Jackson. So there's still some really solid players left. Even got Trace Jackson Davis, who we had the poll. 55% said yes, 45% said no on him being picked in the first round. So he's running out of chances to get picked in the first round. So it looks like potentially that you guys that said no are going to end up being correct. But he will get drafted. He's a really solid player. We'll have to see where he ends up just along with everybody else. But it's going to be interesting. But I really do appreciate all you guys for being here. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Share the stream out on social media. But I appreciate you guys for being here. The Charlotte Hornets, they have the 27th pick, and their pick is in. The Hornets, they are a team. They pick Brandon Miller with the second pick. Let's see who they pick here, but they need players as well. They're another team that's rebuilding. And they take Nick Smith. Nick Smith Jr. out of Arkansas finally is off the board. Good for him. Definitely a guy that fell really far in this draft because of the fact that he was hurt. He fell really hard, and he is upset right now. Tears of joy. He finally got picked. That is big news for Nick Smith. Very happy for him that he finally got picked. It stinks that he got hurt because if he had him, he would have been a much higher pick than this. He's a really good player, but unfortunately the injury bug bit him, and it set him back mightily at Arkansas this past season. He just did not show the skill set that he showed in high school because he was hurt. He didn't have the attack off the dribble. But he didn't get drafted maybe where he wanted to or where he was hoping to be drafted. But he finally is off the board. The Charlotte Hornets take Nick Smith. He averaged 12 points, and he only shot 38% of the field, and he missed 19 games. So, again, clearly he was not healthy. Now you've got the Utah Jazz. They're up next. The Utah Jazz have the next pick in the draft. They're a team that, again, is kind of like the Pacers. They're very close to being back in the playoffs, very close to being a playoff team again, despite the fact that they're technically rebuilding. You know, they have found a way to, even though they lost Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell to trades, they haven't completely fallen apart. They got so much in return. I think that's part of what helped. But I do think that if the Jazz keep drafting really solid players, they can get back to being a playoff team really soon. It's very hard, though, because there's so many great teams in the NBA that it makes it harder and harder to make the playoffs, especially when you're a team at the bottom. But all you got to do is just find a way to break through. Kind of like the Thunder did. They took advantage of the Mavericks falling apart. Maybe if the Jazz, the Pacers, teams like that can just find a way to just build around your team a little more around your better players, especially the Pacers. I think the Pacers get there really soon. Then they could have a really good chance of being able to have success very soon in the future. The Ohio State, I'm surprised Bryce Sensabaugh from my Buckeyes hasn't been picked yet. Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. The Ohio State. I'm copying and pasting the StreamYard link again. If you'd like to talk the Ohio State, it's up to you. About the draft real quick. Probably won't be staying on too much longer because the draft has been going on for a while, but it has been a lot of fun. But yeah, I agree with you, the Ohio State. Bryce Sensabaugh not getting picked is interesting. I mean, he's a freshman, so the potential's there. I know he's struggling in some areas, but you would think that Bryce Sensabaugh would have been taken by now. I thought that he would. So I'd have to agree with you, the Ohio State. I really thought that he would be taken as well. But he probably will be taken soon. I think that he probably will be taken in the next 5 picks, you would think. But it all comes down to team need as well. What do these teams need? If they don't need a player like that, then it's going to be interesting there. V Ohio State, I'll definitely join one of your StreamYards in future streams. Okay, V Ohio State. Not the most presentable now. I feel like you're good. I appreciate that. I'm only asking because of the fact, definitely, just trying to have last calls for StreamYard, see if any of you guys would like to talk. But I appreciate that, V Ohio State. Just appreciate you for being here. But definitely probably will be wrapping up in a few minutes. Probably try to finish at least out the first round. But it's been a fun draft. I really, again, do appreciate you guys for being here. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Share the stream out on social media. But the 2023 NBA draft, it is delivered so far. We got a whole second round left. It's crazy. RC, it's about time Nick Smith went. Yeah, you're right, RC. And again, it brings up the whole debate of whether you should play while hurt. Because again, if he didn't play, then he would have been drafted higher, no doubt about it. If Nick Smith did not play 1 second of basketball after his injury, he probably would have been a top 10 pick, but he played and he fell to 27. And right on cue, via Ohio State right here, the Utah Jazz select Bryce Sensabaugh. There you go. You just said it as well. There it is. Sensabaugh to the Jazz. For sure. I thought he would be taken soon. He had to. I mean, he's too talented. He's too talented of a player to fall even further than that. 6'5", 230. I mean, there are some things that Bryce Sensabaugh does struggle at. There are certain areas, like passing. You can maybe argue defense a little bit. First Ohio State freshman lead team is scoring since 2014-15. That's crazy as well. But Sensabaugh has a lot of talent. He has a shot to stick in the league if he just continues to improve as a player. He averaged 16 points and 5 boards. He shot 48% of the field and 41% from 3. I mean, the stats are there. The shooting stats are there. I just think it's more like the defense. I think like the defense and just he didn't pass much. He's a great scorer. He's a microwave scorer. The Ohio State, I'm still mad how well the Jazz did this past season. Lauri Markkanen's improvement was just flat out amazing. Yeah, he did improve. I mean, that's to your point. The Jazz are so close. potentially to be in a playoff team. And the fact that they lost, like again, Rudy Gobert, and they lost Donovan Mitchell, and the fact that they stayed competitive, they didn't fall completely apart. I mean, again, that shows me that the Jazz are not going to be bad for too much longer. Like having a losing record anyway. You think they're probably going to get back to being really solid again soon. I think they made good picks as well. It's all about drafting the right players that have the right fit for your team. And then overall, just trying to have improvement from the players that you already have. If you can get all that to happen, then things can really work out. We're about to find out for sure if Trayce Jackson-Davis will be selected in the first round or not. The poll is 45% no, 55% yes. But it does look like the no's could be correct. There's only 2 picks left in the first round. So we'll have to see. You've got the Pacers next at 29. They've got the 29th pick, and I think it's going to the Nuggets because of the trade that they did. It was a very small trade. The Nuggets gave the Pacers 2 picks, and the Pacers gave them 2 picks back in return. Really interesting how that worked out. It's kind of shocking how it went down. It's just one of those small little trades. A trade that not many people are talking about, especially with the Bradley Beal trade and Chris Paul and all that. And then you've got the Marcus Smart, trade with Kristaps Porzingis, and then you've got Jordan Poole leaving, all this stuff all around. It's just crazy. So I think those trades definitely have overshadowed, looking at some of these other trades like the Denver Nuggets trade with the Pacers. Much smaller in impact, but still a trade nonetheless. And a very interesting trade. It's always wild to see why teams do what they do. It's almost like they just see the fact that, maybe they feel like this pick will be a little bit more valuable. I think like the Nuggets, are getting a first-round pick or something like that. So it's just really interesting. The Ohio State said, you have any predictions on how many points a rebound Wembanyama will average this upcoming season? That's a good question. That is a really good question. I mean, overall, looking at Victor Wembanyama, he's a mystery to begin with because he's so talented. But will it translate to the NBA? And hopefully for him, he won't have a Chet Holmgren situation where he gets hurt. That would be the worst thing in the world. Everybody wants to see Chet Holmgren. Everyone wants to see Victor Wembanyama. So hopefully he stays healthy. But if he plays and he does not get injured, which I hope that's not the case, I really hope he stays healthy. I think he could average maybe like 12 to 14 points and maybe 10 boards. Maybe he can do better than that. But I just have a hard time seeing him like scoring 20 and like 12. Maybe 14 points, 10 boards, something like that. I think he could. Because he's going to start. We know that. He's going to start. They're definitely not going to have him off the bench at the Spurs. They're going to start him, but it's just going to be interesting to see how much of an impact he will have. It's a great question, though. I think it's a fantastic question. Thanks for asking, the Ohio State. Really appreciate you still for being here. We're now about to find out the 29th pick. The Indiana Pacers select Julian Strawther. So I guess that pick's going to the Nuggets. Interesting. Julian Strawther out of Gonzaga. He's a guy that people had further down the board. ESPN had him as the 20th best player available, but the Pacers / Denver Nuggets, I guess, saw something in him there. The Ohio State said if he stays healthy, I can see him getting 15 point, 13, 14 boards a game. Yeah, that's possible for sure, Ohio State. That's not far off where I said, like 12, 14, 10 rebounds. I mean, you have him about averaging about a couple more points and a couple more boards, but I could see it. I mean, you got a great point, Ohio State. I mean, if he stays healthy, he could average that much, especially considering the fact the Spurs aren't the best team in the world, so he's probably going to get more chances to score. So you're right. He probably will score that much. You never know. Ooh, we've got another vote for yes on Trayce Jackson-Davis. Will Trayce Jackson-Davis be selected in the first round? 58% yes, 42% no. There's only one pick left. It's the Clippers. He could get drafted by the Clippers, realistically. He could be a backup to Zubac. You never know. The Ohio State, Strother hit that crazy on 3 beat UCLA in the Sweet 16. I remember watching that game live on here in March. Yeah, I appreciate you being there then, the Ohio State, and here now, really do. But yeah, you were here. That was a fantastic game. What a shot by Julian Strother. Maybe that shot alone is why he got drafted as high as he did. You never want to say it's just because of one shot. You would like to think it's because of your whole entire game. And Julian Strother showcased a lot at, Gonzaga. But I do think that overall, Strother hitting that 3 definitely helped him. RC said Denver loves 4 stretching agile forwards. Yeah, so to your point, it makes sense to get Strother. So I think he definitely could have an impact for the Nuggets. The Nuggets have been doing a great job lately of having players that have seemingly overperformed their expectations in the rookie year, like a Christian Brown. So maybe they can have that type of success with Julian Strother. We've got the Clippers, though. Who are the Clippers going to take? They've got the 30th pick and they've got the 48th pick, and they said they need stability at point guard, which is really interesting because the point guard position is an area where there's not a lot of players left on the board. So I don't really think that the Clippers can really draft a point guard. Let's try to look down the point guard list. Who's left at point guard? You got Amari Bailey out of UCLA. You've got a couple shooting guards, that maybe can kind of play point guard, like a Terquavian Smith at NC State, but I don't really think he's a true point guard. I don't know. That's really interesting. They also said the Clippers need health, which obviously you can't really draft health. They just need Paul George and Kawhi Leonard to stay healthy to give themselves a chance to win a title. And they need more point guard help. The Ohio State, what are your thoughts on the Warriors, Wizards, CP3 and Poole trade and the Celtics, Wizard, Grizzly trades today? Yeah, the Ohio State, great question. I've been thinking about it a lot. Like some of the trades I didn't even know about yet. Like the Chris Paul, actually, even though I think it happened earlier, I just saw it just now with watching the draft. It's crazy. So much stuff going on. But I think that the Celtics trade, I think they won the trade. I think they won the trade to get Chris Stapps. It's a good trade, but losing Smart hurts because Smart, it was the heart and soul of the team, like Edward said earlier. And he's a guy that makes the rest of the team better defense because he rallies them up or whatever. I still think that the Celtics won that trade, though. The Chris Paul with Poole, I don't really understand. I think that unless the Warriors are going to start Chris Paul and Curry, then the trade doesn't make sense. Because you traded Poole, who is a younger guy that can shoot lights out. I get that sometimes he's a bit ball dominant, but Jordan Poole can score at a much higher level than Chris Paul. And Jordan Poole also is going to be in the league a lot longer than Chris Paul. Chris Paul's only got a couple years left. So I don't really get that one. Honestly, I think they should have not traded Poole for CP3 there. And then, I don't think it's terrible. It's great for Chris Paul, to have a shot to win the proverbial title, but I don't think it's a good trade with trading Poole. With the Bradley Beal one, with the Suns, the Suns getting Bradley Beal is fine, but they traded so many picks away. Like the Suns are going to be like the Denver Broncos in the NFL, where you're trading everything you got, where you're going to end up having nothing, in the future. Like the Denver Broncos don't have any picks for ever, any significant ones anyway, in the NFL. And it's like the Suns, you've traded all your picks and you've traded all of your assets like Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder. I kind of just feel like that the Suns, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton and Kevin Durant, if they keep Ayton anyway, and Kevin Durant's fine, but they don't have a bench still, so they haven't fixed that problem. Now they've traded all their picks, and they're not going to be able to draft younger guys that are going to be solid. So in a way, I almost feel like the Suns have lost the trade anyway, even though Bradley Beal's a great player. The Ohio State's Warriors didn't get any better from the trade. I agree, 100%. Definitely, there's just no way that CP3 getting traded to the Warriors and Poole even is a good trade. That doesn't make sense at all. Nothing against Chris Paul because he's a great player, but he's older. Like you said, Paul's getting old and he gets injured a lot, and Poole's younger and averages a lot more points. It doesn't make much sense. On the clock, the Clippers finally select their pick. It's Kobe Brown, forward out of Missouri. That's kind of a wild card there. Kobe Brown was a guy that ESPN is their 16th best player available on the board, but he got taken. I guess they really like what he did at Missouri. He's a solid player. He could have come back to college. He did not, but it worked out for him because he ended up being a first-round pick to the Clippers. That's crazy, but the first round is done. The Ohio State Warriors need big men and better bench play in their stars to stay healthy. I agree with you, the Ohio State, 100%. Definitely. They need center play there, and they need better bench play. You definitely have to have bench play. Bench play is important. That's why Denver won, because of their bench. Kobe Brown averaged 16.6 boards and 3 assists this past year. He shot 55% from the field. Again, a really solid player. Out of Missouri, he's an older guy. Again, a very shocking he got taken this high, but definitely awesome for him. I'll probably wrap up the stream. Last call for StreamYard if anybody wants to talk about the draft real quick. But if not, I do really appreciate you guys for being here. I've been live for 3 hours and 15 minutes. I'd like to stay live for the rest of the draft, but definitely it's been going on for a long time. But it has been a lot of fun for sure. The Ohio State this year's Nuggets team reminded me of the old Spurs greats team with Duncan, Parker, and Manu. Yeah, definitely. But almost like with more depth. Almost more depth instead of the star power, just Jokic and Murray, whereas Duncan, Parker, and Manu. But like you said, very similar. I would agree with you there. But it was a fun draft. It's not over yet. You got the second round, but I've been live for 3 hours and 15 minutes. I really do appreciate you guys for being here. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Share the stream out on social media. But thanks for being here, via Ohio State. Thanks for being here, RC, and everyone else that has been here tonight. I really appreciate it. Via Ohio State says, yeah, I can see Nuggets winning more titles. 100%. I do believe that they will win more titles as well if they can keep the majority of the nucleus of the roster together. 100%. You are correct, via Ohio State. Great stream as always. Take care. Really appreciate that, via Ohio State. Thanks for being here. Hope you have a great night. Hope whatever you had for dinner was awesome as well. Really appreciate you for being here. But definitely can't wait for the second round of the draft. Thanks for being here, guys, for the first round. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being here, everybody.